Nerdrotic.com.
Greetings, you over 1 million awakening wonders and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. Remember when Marvel was good? When going to a Marvel film was an event? You get the family, the friends, the little kiddos, and get your popcorn, sit down, and with varying degrees, you knew you were going to get something at least pretty good. Hell, considering what we know right now, looking back at Thor: The Dark World, Avengers: Age of Ultron, or even Iron Man 3, some of us are looking back going, maybe we judged you too harshly. Because there's a saying in Hollywood, and no, it's not survive until 25, or we'll get it fixed in 26, or even male and pale as stale because Deadpool and Wolverine proved that wasn't true. No, it's things can always get worse. Because as the days go by, it's getting harder to remember that Marvel and Disney Marvel once made stuff that people actually liked. Sure, some really expensive, bad films may have eked out a profit like Doctor Strange Mom, Thor: Love and Blunder, or Wakanda Forever, none of which are looked back on fondly, something we went over extensively with the films in part 1 of the rise and fall of the MCU. But as you know, this is only half of the story because there are the Disney Plus shows. This will have to take us to the very dark before times. And dark times they were. It was a time of masks, a time of riots, and a time of an authoritative government response to a cold, leading to a bunch of us being locked down for a long amount of time with nothing to do but watch television. And coincidentally enough, a lot of studios had their streaming services ready to go, including Disney, where coincidentally Disney CEO Bob Iger decided to retire for no apparent reason. You know, coincidences are so coincidental. And again, it was a time, coincidentally, where Disney Marvel had the bright idea to take the money-printing machine known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the highest-grossing film franchise in history, and turn it into
trash
content on a platform designed to influence more than entertain. That's right, they're going to take all the bad ideas from the post-Endgame movies and put them into TV shows, making them longer bad ideas, including the concept of the MCU. And since we went over this in part 1, I'll keep this brief. The MCU was created by Kevin Feige when he stated back in 2018 in response to the criticism that there weren't enough women in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He said there would be more female characters than male characters, a decision that was clearly more ideological than creative. MCU stories have male legacy characters either be brought down to size or completely vandalized, even when they're supposed to be the titular character of their show, all to lift up female characters with no characters. There is no arc. They run on a straight line known as the hero's journey. What is the hero's journey? Well, the hero was great all along, and she only had to rediscover her power after being held down by the patriarchy. And the good old Disney Plus, well, the first couple episodes of a series were okay, and then they all inevitably end like crap. You'll see male heroes judged harshly for their past deeds, and female heroes completely forgiven for doing things like kidnapping men, women, and children.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
Just let us die.
But let's give Kevin Feige credit. He put in a lot of work along with a lot of other people to make the MCU so good for so long, and he on his own put in an equal amount of work to make it so bad in a really short amount of time. What really helped that was dispensing of most of the creative minds behind the MCU and replacing them with writers and directors who were not hired but cast based on their identity. And that's just scratching the surface, so please join me on this Supercut part 2 of Marvel's The Rise and Fall of the MCU, the Disney Plus disasters. WandaVision had such a promising start, but ultimately it ended in disappointment. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, and so have many others. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Just ask any woman on the planet. Initially, on the surface, WandaVision looked like an ambitious show, especially for the homogenous Disney Plus, which we will from now on call D+. It started out a little bit Legion, which was in the beginning a very good show, but it ended up being like Iron Man 2 with the morals of Wonder Woman 1984. Now, does my disappointment stem from fan theories or fan theorizing? No, not at all. Now, I'm not the kind of person who theorizes, but that's what you want fans doing, and in the beginning, that's what was succeeding about this show. You got me to crack open old Avengers comics, watch some older MCU films. God, they're older MCU films now. That's how long it's been around. So no, you can't blame the fans for being disappointed. It's pretty well earned. The Disney hype train was on. They announced this show with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness back in 2019, and they insinuated heavily that this would lead directly into that sequel, which it did not do. It's a light prequel at the very best, and it's not the fans' fault that their theories were better than anything we got on the screen. And yes, Elizabeth Olsen did insinuate that there would be a Luke Skywalker-like cameo, and that ended up being Evan Peters as Boner, and we will definitely talk about that. It was the story that failed in the end, and some characters that outright didn't belong in this show, and some characters who ripped me right out of it. Now, of course, it's a tale of two shows. That's what it's supposed to be. The only problem is the other show within this show is what took me out of the show. Now, there are going to be some spoilers, but I'm not going to go over every detail, although I probably could, because this was a film that was stretched over 9 very short episodes with insanely long credits. There was some good, there was some bad, there was some mediocre, and there was some MCU. What's the MCU? You mean aside from Captain Marvel? Well, it started in Ant-Man and Wasp, which should be called Wasp and Ant-Man. Just take a look at that poster. Ant-Man was a buffoon in his entire movie. Then we had the A-Force scene in Avengers Endgame, which was completely ridiculous. Of course, we had that awful Captain Marvel movie, and now we have WandaVision, a show I have changed my mind on so many times. I'm right there with you, drinker. I started liking it at first. Now that I've seen the whole thing and seen the context, I think it's all terrible. The performances far outshine the writing in this. And Elizabeth Olsen was good as Wanda Maximoff and now Scarlet Witch officially, and Paul Bettany is great as the Vision. And they had pretty good chemistry together, but that was about it. And when they separated in those last 2 episodes, it really showed a lot of the flaws, and we will get to those flaws. I will tell you exactly why I don't like this show, and I don't like the direction the MCU is going in, and I really don't like the structure and format of Disney Plus. I think it's a flat-out ripoff. Now, the first 3 episodes did a really good job matching the aesthetic of each respective sitcom that they were paying homage to, but that was it. Nothing else happened. We were slowly being introduced to our cast of characters, which I thought would have much more impact. There was Herb, Phil Jones, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, and of course, Anya from Buffy. It was great seeing Emma Caulfield playing Dottie Jones, but they ended up just being people in the town that Wanda was torturing. The most impactful thing that happened in the first episode was at the end when we saw a mysterious woman watching WandaVision on TV. And in the second episode, we got a drone in color and the beekeeper who disappeared completely from the rest of the show, and it just ended up being Sword observing them. We were also introduced to Geraldine, who would eventually become Monica Rambeau. She helped deliver Tommy and Billy, who will eventually become Wiccan and Speed of the Young Avengers. And of course, we know she was brought into Wanda's world because subconsciously Wanda knew she would be an ally, and that's the exact language they used.
You trusted me to help deliver your babies. On some level, Wanda, you know I am an ally.
After the third episode, the mystery box kicks in. The good old mystery box, a product of one of my favorite repurposers in Hollywood, Jar Jar Abrams. It is meant to make a story look a lot more complex than it really is. A great example of what mystery box does is what WandaVision did in episode 3 and 4. It showed you the same story from 2 different perspectives, but they both ended up in the same place. Sure, we got to know more about Monica Rambeau, who ended up being nothing to this story by the time it ended, other than being really powerful. Along with the mystery box comes the unreliable narrator. These stories can work over long periods of time, but we are talking about a one-off series that was only supposed to be 9 episodes that could have been a lot shorter. In the beginning, the introduction to Monica Rambeau was pretty damn good. We see her in the hospital and she's just coming back from the snap. We see the chaos and I was fascinated by this part. We find out that her mom died of cancer and that she missed it. She had fallen asleep in the hospital and woke up 5 years later. Now, I have huge problems with the 5-year gap and the snap. That's a video for another day. Now, this is where the problems started creeping in, but it wasn't that bad at first. Monica Rambeau goes back to work, and it turns out her mom, Maria Rambeau, built S.W.O.R.D. from scratch. Apparently, she went to Home Depot, bought herself a tool set, and built that place from the ground up. We learned this through a brief conversation between Monica Rambeau and our new character, Director Hayward, who will now be known as Director Toxic Male. In that conversation, Director Toxic Male apologizes for his very existence while he's telling Monica Rambeau how great she really is. Monica Rambeau is assigned a missing persons case in New Jersey that she decides to take, and she meets Jimmy Woo from Ant-Man, and this is where the mystery starts to deepen. To round out our plucky little diverse team, we're introduced to Kat Dennings' character from Thor, who I can't even be bothered to remember the name of, and it appears her only existence in this show is to annoy the entire audience. Seriously, after watching WandaVision all the way through 3 times, I'm not sure why she was there other than we need women in STEM.
Honestly, I'm a STEM type of lady.
Do you want an example of MCU? Well, here you go.
She could have taken out Thanos on her own if he hadn't initiated a blitz. I mean, nobody else came close.
Well, I'd argue that Captain Marvel came close.
And if my aunt had gonads, she'd be my uncle. Aside from that being one of the many dumb lines in this series, this is how the MCU destroys the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In 2 short lines, you cut the balls off of your biggest villain and you make the Avengers look like a bunch of idiots. Thor came pretty close too last time I checked. And you make your beloved Captain Marvel look like a selfish bitch. She ended up taking off half the time when she could have ended this whenever she wanted. Yes, it's just as bad as Nick Fury losing his eye to a little kitty cat. I'm sure that's exactly the kind of thing Jack Schaefer would find hilarious. So, we have 2 Avengers trapped in a sitcom world along with thousands of other people in a town that doesn't exist. We find out that S.W.O.R.D. has set up operations outside what they call the anomaly. Now, the big mystery was supposed to be who trapped Wanda Maximoff in this town. They were making it look like there was somebody else behind it, especially when Wanda at one point says, I have no idea how I got here. Now, there were little hints that it could have been Mephisto, but a lot of that was fan projection. They were alluding to some deeper mysteries that never really fleshed out for me anyway. There was no children in the town, and during the magic show in the 2nd episode, there was that for the children part, and again, that made it look like it might have been Mephisto, or at least somebody like Nightmare, but we find out what happened to the children, and we will get into that, but I want you to think about the morals of Wonder Woman 1984. Remember when Wonder Woman raped a guy? Yeah, it's about that bad. But it couldn't have been Mephisto. You want to know why? Jack Schaefer, the showrunner for WandaVision, the writer for the upcoming Black Widow, and the contributor to Captain Marvel, had no idea who Mephisto was until she started doing press for WandaVision. Schaefer stated, there was never any conscious intention on my part to create any Mephisto red herrings because I didn't know who Mephisto was until I started doing press. Oh, MCU. Everything fell apart after the Evan Peters cameo, and again, you cannot blame the fans for coming up with better ideas than the people who are actually paid to tell us this story on a premium streaming service. Even the quote-unquote creatives involved in making the show knew they were in for trouble. More on that later. One of the many problems with mystery box storytelling is when your mystery isn't that mysterious, when the audience catches on long before the writers intended for them to catch on, and the audience has to sit around and wait while the characters and story catch up to them. According to showrunner Jack Schaefer, WandaVision is a character study in a woman's grief. which I would buy and think was compelling if there was a basis for this relationship outside of one flashback scene in this series and a 3-minute scene in Avengers Infinity War. Other than that, there's nothing. Even if this was the Vision and Scarlet Witch relationship from the comics, it wouldn't justify Wanda Maximoff enslaving thousands of people and torturing children, which will affect them for the rest of their lives. We reviewed every individual episode on Friday Night Tights, and up until the last one, I was intrigued, but it was that final episode that makes this entire series a complete waste of time. So we eventually find out what's going on, and quite frankly, what you guys came up with was much better than what Jack Schaefer came up with. Wanda Maximoff woke up sad one day and wanted to say goodbye to what was left of Vision's body, which was being disassembled on his orders from his will. She says her goodbyes, then goes to a house that Vision purchased for her because they were going to move in together after a 3-week relationship. What are they, lesbians? And she was so upset she created a new Vision, a house, a couple of kids, and enslaved thousands of people and hundreds of children because she was grieving. Everything director Toxic White Male was doing made absolute sense up until this point. He was protecting the thousands of people in that town. And we got incredible lines like this.
You don't bother me, I won't bother you.
I wish it could be that simple. You've taken an entire town hostage.
Well, I'm not the one with the guns, director.
Yes, he has guns. You have enslaved thousands of people and hundreds of children. Turns out director Toxic White Male was evil after all, and he had a master plan. First, he hired an effects team to create some fake footage of Wanda Maximoff stealing Vision's body, which she didn't do. Director Toxic White Male was illegally reassembling Vision for S.W.O.R.D. The next part of this evil master plan was to frame Wanda Maximoff for creating Vision. Then he would have his Vision kill her Vision and Wanda Maximoff. The government would thank him for recovering a valuable asset, and he wouldn't get in trouble for illegally reassembling Vision. But if Wanda didn't go crazy and create this town, what was his big plan to cover up the fact that he illegally reassembled Vision? There was a little hitch in director Toxic White Male's evil plan. He didn't know how to turn Vision on, but luckily, when he tried to kill Wanda with a 1980s drone in the second or third episode, there was some residual Wanda Maximoff magic on it. Ugh. And he was able to use that residual Wanda Maximoff magic to turn on the Toxic White Vision. Now, the organization of S.W.O.R.D., which was originally from Astonishing X-Men, written by Joss Whedon, and it was supposed to be an offshoot of S.H.I.E.L.D., was presented in WandaVision like a military organization run by a Hollywood writer's room filled with Marin soccer moms. And WandaVision gave us brilliant examples of writing like this.
She's holding thousands of people hostage.
And it could have been thousands more.
Then, of course, there is Agnes, who we all knew was Agatha Harkness from the first episode, yet the show was treating it like it was a big mystery, and apparently it was Agatha all along. Now, Agatha Harkness originally was Franklin Richards' babysitter and a mentor to the Scarlet Witch in the comics, but in this show, they decided to make her a lot younger, and she steals magic from other magic users. Now, I don't know how she got into the town where Wanda had enslaved a bunch of people. Apparently, she was just following Wanda Maximoff around until she decided to do something extremely powerful. She brings with her a little book called The Darkhold, which is from the comics, but we get a little more MCU here in this book. They prophesize the coming of the Scarlet Witch, the destroyer of worlds, a sorcerer more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme. And they end up cutting the nuts off of Doctor Strange before his sequel even goes into production. Well done. Now, they completely retconned Agatha Harkness from the comic books, but her character being present in this show is what led a lot of people who have read comics to believe that there might be an appearance from Mephisto or Magneto or other Avengers, but we now know that wasn't the case. Aside from not knowing who Mephisto was, Jack Schaefer also admitted that she doesn't know how to read comic books. I'm not a very good comic book reader. I have a hard time digesting the storylines, and I never know which cell to look at, and I don't know. I'm a disappointment, perhaps, to the fandom in that way. But the imagery is always, of course, very startling and moving, even though I don't know how to read it, and inspiring. And it was Kevin Feige's idea to marry Wanda and Vision to the sitcom world. Then there's Vision, one of the most intelligent characters in the comics and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, being completely clueless for this entire series. About halfway through the show, he makes it through the barrier and he sees that there's a military organization there and he asks them for help. And then he spends the rest of the series just kind of meandering around while they play out the sitcom element of the show that started fading out around halfway through. We did Full House, Malcolm in the Middle, and we ended with Modern Family. But one of the worst things in this show was a scene between Kat Denning and Vision. And thanks to Mahler for initially pointing this out in an EFAP we did. I think it ended up running about 10 hours. Link will be in the description. Mahler pointed out that this should have been the most emotionally impactful scene in the series when Kat Denning is telling Vision how he died and she's filling him in on his past, and they ended up just making it a joke. This brings us to Evan Peters' Quicksilver. Obviously, he is the one from the X-Men films. That's what was stated in the audio description of this show. Did Agatha Harkness accidentally pull the wrong Quicksilver from another reality or across the multiverse because she couldn't perform necromancy on the Pietro in the MCU because his body was on another continent? Or was there a guy in the town who just happened to look like Evan Peters named Boner? And yes, Wanda just accepts Boner as her brother, and the reason given in the show was because she was grieving. Now, if Agatha Harkness can just pick any and give him Quicksilver's powers or anybody's powers, why go through all this trouble? Why not give Boner the powers of Doctor Strange and he could figure out how she was practicing that magic that she didn't know how to do? And then, sorry if I sound like a broken record, because this is mystery box storytelling, everything stops in the penultimate episode and we get Wanda Maximoff's backstory. Was this the moment where they introduce the mutants into the MCU? Not really. We do find out that Wanda Maximoff had her powers from birth, and it was the Infinity Stone that enhanced them. Her parents lived in Sokovia. That part wasn't changed. And we finally get an answer to the sitcom element of the show. Turns out her dad sold sitcom DVDs in the war-torn Sokovia for a living, and the ones he didn't sell, they would watch. So each episode and some of the commercials was just Wanda processing her grief. Now, a couple of the commercials didn't really make sense, especially the Nexus commercial, which was the biggest red herring of this show. The Nexus is a cross-dimensional gateway to the multiverse in the Marvel Comics, but they don't refer to this at all. Then there's the Monica Rambeau storyline, which again went absolutely nowhere, but her story goes something like this. She's smart, she's sassy, she breaks a lot of rules. She had a $1 billion truck made to her exact specifications within 24 hours to get through the barrier. Truck doesn't work, but that's okay because she's awesome. She's going to walk through the barrier by herself, and when she comes out the other side, she's going to be a superhero. That's right, Monica Rambeau becomes a superhero by breaking a barrier while being positively affirmed. I'm thinking there's some kind of message that I might be missing here because I just don't care. So Monica risks her life to break through the barrier, becomes a superhero, and does absolutely nothing. She gets into an argument with Wanda. She gets caught by Boner. Then she escapes Boner. Then she saves a couple of fake kids and lets the villain go. Now everything is set up for the big superhero battle at the end. We have Toxic White Vision versus Wanda's Vision, and we have Agatha Harkness versus the Scarlet Witch. We have the men fighting the men and the women fighting the women, because we can't have men fighting women, but we can have women fighting men as long as they don't fight back. Wanda's Vision transfers his memories into Toxic White Vision, which of course is the rebuilt original Vision by director Toxic White Male, and he becomes Vision. And then he does what all men do. Leaves. In the fight with Agatha Harkness, Wanda gets to see how much trauma she has put the townspeople through, and she decides to let them go, and they all leave without their children. Agatha Harkness and Scarlet Witch exchange purple and red energy balls for a little while, and then Scarlet Witch defeats Agatha with magic she didn't know how to use 5 minutes earlier. Sword breaks in through the crack in the barrier. They fight Tommy and Billy, and Director Toxic White Male decides to shoot a couple of fake children, but they are saved by the stunning and brave and empowered Monica Rambeau. Scarlet Witch defeats Agatha Harkness and imprisons her back into her character of the nosy neighbor forever until she needs her for some magical advice. Director Toxic White Male is arrested. I'm not quite sure why the rest of Sword, who was fully aware of what they were doing, weren't arrested, but whatever. So in the end, Wanda finally decides to do the right thing, but I'm not sure if she does it for the right reasons. She lets go of Vision and Tommy and Billy, who never existed in the first place, and frees all the townspeople and their children. Then she is let go by Monica Rambeau, and I didn't mean that to rhyme. Now we come to the line that defines this entire series.
They'll never know what you sacrificed for them.
No, they won't understand what Wanda sacrificed because they'll be too busy going to therapy and taking their kids to therapy and praying they don't grow up with drug problems.
Same story, different century. There'll always be torches and pitchforks for ladies like us.
I know, people can be so harsh. She only enslaved thousands of people. She could have enslaved thousands more. So the omnipotent psychopath gets to walk free. Once she shed herself of the family dynamic, she now has achieved full empowerment, and she's going to take off and read a book in the mountains. So the moral of this tale is, if you've been victimized, if you're sad, you can be as horrible as you want to anyone. Basically, Twitter. So what happens to the kids? Well, we don't really know. Pietro or Boner mentions they might be asleep in their beds, crapping their pants because they can't go to the bathroom. Dottie mentions that her 8-year-old daughter is trapped in her room, and she mentions this right before she abandons her. Or maybe there was a throwaway line that I missed, and I don't care enough to go back and watch this a 4th time to find out. This was a total disappointment. Sure, it's unfair, the expectations put on this show, because it was the first thing to come out since Endgame, but it's clear what direction the MCU is going in, especially after watching 3 episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier. MCU. WandaVision had great potential, and it had some decent moments, mostly with Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. Everything else falls at the feet of the writers that Marvel hired. There are lessons to be learned that Disney Marvel will completely ignore. Number 1, do not lie to your audience. Number 2, do not shame your audience for coming up with better stories than the writers that you hired. The third, and maybe most important, when you're adapting a superhero comic book, maybe hire a showrunner who knows how to read a comic book. Remember this Loki? I don't. So we're here to review a little show called Loki, guest starring Tom Hiddleston. Of course, he wasn't the titular character because the titular character had teats. The pisser about Loki is it had the most potential, and this was the series I was looking the most forward to. Obviously, I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I thought Loki could be the Doctor Who of the MCU, and that's how they pitched it, at least in the trailer. Loki ended up being a bait and switch on a couple of levels. In the trailer, they certainly made it look like it was going to be a time-traveling romp and not a series of sitting down at tables and talking. Now, this show ended up being about Loki, just not the one we liked. So, there will be spoilers, there will be crying, there will be feelings in hallways. Dare I say, Marvel's going full CW. This is Loki, the trickster, the god of mischief. You shouldn't have known which way was up in this series. We shouldn't have known which Loki was real. This should have been the ultimate in unreliable narrator. Think Memento meets Inception, except in the Marvel Universe. That would have been pretty cool, but instead we got girl power. That's right, Loki is the most MCU thing in the MCU, and in a lot of ways, it's just as bad as Black Widow. I mean, this show is linear. How could you make a Loki show linear? What am I thinking? This is Disney. I've already gone over the first episode in detail, which you can check out right here, but we will briefly recap the inconsistencies with the beginning. Of course, we started in Endgame, and the minute Loki departed from Endgame, this show departed from anything Marvel. He lands in the CGI Gobi Desert and starts speaking English in Mongolia, when later on in the series, it's shown that Loki is indeed capable of speaking native languages.
Me Norman es Loki.
Unfortunately, the priority wasn't consistency in character or storytelling, it was only in deconstructing Loki. Within the matter of a couple of minutes, we make Loki look like a bumbling idiot, and this is only the beginning. And of course, Body Positivity Time Cop shows up and punches him in the face in slow motion. Apparently, they're trying to make some sort of statement here, and you would think you wouldn't want to do this with your main character, but it turns out this isn't the main character. 30 minutes prior, Loki was fighting the Avengers. Now, at this point, you're thinking, wow, Body Positivity Time Cop must be powerful. She must have some sort of superpowers because they're on planet Earth right now, and Loki still has all of his powers. How did she knock his ass out? Keep that in mind. We'll get back to it. And this is where we meet our surprisingly small recurring cast of characters. Of course, we have the guest star and the companion in his own series, the inconsequential male Loki. Then we are introduced to subordinate Mobius, played by Owen Wilson. He is subordinate to Girl Boss, who I'm going to continue to call Girl Boss, but her name is Ravonna Renslayer, and we'll talk about that later. And, of course, Body Positivity Time Cop. Body Positivity Time Cop works for the TVA, the Time Variance Agency, and she apprehends the very weak and inconsequential male Loki. The TVA guards the sacred timeline. The sacred timeline is controlled by the timekeepers, or so we think. Turns out that inconsequential male Loki is just a variant, and every time a variant occurs, it creates a branch in the sacred timeline that needs to be pruned. Owen Wilson's very subordinate Mobius wants to use this inconsequential male Loki to help find a rogue variant who is ambushing and murdering in cold blood all of the time cops, which look suspiciously like extras hastily put into costumes that don't fit. We also find out that things like the Infinity Stones are rendered useless in the TVA wherever the TVA is, which we never really find out. This ends up being the first of a lot of scenes where two characters will sit down and talk. In this episode, mainly Loki and Mobius are sitting down and talking, and in this case, we're discussing Loki's feelings. And we watch Loki review Much Better MCU, cry, Mobius wants to know what makes him tick, and eventually we get this. And this.
I'll give you two options, and you can believe whichever one you want. A, because I see a scared little boy shivering in the cold, and you kind of feel bad for that ice runt.
So everything is predetermined, and there is no free will in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Loki is just a scared little boy. But there was one more reveal. He's not the only Loki. Now, yes, I'm just doing the quote-unquote highlights in this review because otherwise, I would be talking about a lot of sitting down and talking, because most of the second episode was just that. Girl Boss sitting down and talking to Mobius, Mobius sitting down and talking to Loki, Loki sitting down and doing some work by himself, and then Loki and Mobius sitting down and talking. During all this sitting down and talking, which is starting to look suspiciously like drawing this thing out much longer than it needs to be because it wasn't really necessary, we do finally get some necessary information. Subordinate Mobius and inconsequential inconsequential male Loki figure out that the other Loki variant is hiding out in Doomsdays to hide the fact that they are a living and breathing Nexus event. And we spend the entire second episode leading up to a reveal that we could all see miles away. Oh, sorry, wrong reveal. Just like with the Taskmaster, everyone who has been paying attention could see this coming. It's a female Loki which is much smarter, stronger, independent, and empowered. You go, girl!
This isn't about you.
And no truer words have been spoken in this series. It turns out very capable female Loki has a power that the inconsequential male Loki doesn't have, enchantment, and she was able to get the jump on C20, which apparently not anyone can do because C20 is one of the more formidable time cops. Just look at her. Can't imagine how anyone got the jump on her, especially with the revelation that we get in the next episode. We'll talk specifically about the deceptive trailers from Loki in just a bit, but remember the one scene that looked like it was Vormir and possibly Black Widow from a distance? There was a lot of fan theories, and just like all the other previous Disney Plus shows, they ended up being better than what we actually got on the screen, that we had to pay for, that you had to pay for, that was behind a paywall. I wish it was Black Widow on Vormir. It would have made Black Widow and this show more interesting, but unfortunately, it was all about female Loki. After that shocking reveal that everyone saw coming, inconsequential male Loki followed female Loki to the Time Variance Agency, where she almost made it to the Timekeepers. Remember when Body Positivity Time Cop laid out male Loki?
Get out of my way.
Well, female Loki was able to, in the TVA, without her powers, take out 4 guards. Again, without superpowers. During the fight, male Loki steals female Loki's tempad and they transport to a planet called Lamentis 1. And it's doomed just like the MCU or the MCU, which is one of the doomsdays that female Loki already had pre-programmed into her tempad. So, of course, she blames male Loki for transporting them there. It's almost like they don't want to miss a single opportunity to diminish and destroy male Loki. You know, for a minute, this episode looked promising. There's a bunch of meteors and little meteorites crashing all around him. They run for cover under a truck that's later destroyed. Then they run into a trailer and somehow all of the meteors stop. And for the rest of the episode, the meteors miraculously miss them whenever they need to sit down and have a conversation, which they do for 2 long spells in this episode. I'm sorry, 3 long spells in this episode. And that's only broken up by them walking and talking. In a way, this is like Doctor Who. The entire episode is male Loki following female Loki and asking her questions. So, in the interest of saving time, I will tell you what happened in this episode. Female Loki is pretty amazing. She taught herself magic. Male Loki is bisexual.
You're a prince. Must have been would-be princesses, or perhaps another prince.
A bit of both.
And everyone's a variant in the TVA. We also find out female Loki's master plan, which just so happens to be the entire plot of this entire series.
For years in the making plan was to tear the place down, create the ultimate power vacuum, and then just walk away.
Minus one little detail. There's a flashback scene with little female Loki who is sitting there playing innocently, and then she is interrupted and taken away by the time cops, and one of those time cops is Ravonna Renslayer, girl boss, but at the time she's just a hunter. And in this origin scene, they managed to mix in a little social messaging. Little female Loki is able to escape quite easily by stepping on girl boss's toe, stealing her tempad, and leaving. If you missed this scene, that's completely okay, because a few minutes later, female Loki tells the whole story again to inconsequential male Loki.
I escaped. stole a TemPad, and I ran.
Mobius wants to interrogate the formidable Hunter C-20, who was enchanted by the Enchantress, who's really female Loki. Female Loki is able to unscramble the brains of the variants with her enchantment, and they can remember their previous lives. And this happens to C-20, so she had to be offed, and it also happens to Body Positivity Time Cop. While female Loki is recounting the origin we just saw, we find out that she is amazing. Do you know how I know?
You're amazing.
I'm sure glad Loki said that, because I almost forgot the last time he said she was amazing last episode. No! Loki falls in love with himself. It creates a Nexus event, which brings the Time Cops. They get captured. They get separated. They mention that they have more guards on female Loki than male Loki.
By the way, I should have an equal amount of security. This is insulting.
Although that completely contradicts a couple of days ago when S.H.I.E.L.D. had 20 guards on male Loki? Then we get to the most pivotal scene in the entire series, Loki getting kicked in the balls over and over again by Lady Sif. But before we get to Loki getting kicked in the balls repeatedly, let's recap just some of the humiliations. I don't have time to put them all in.
I specialize in the pursuit of dangerous variants. Like myself. No particularly dangerous variants. You're just a little pussycat. I am here. No, I don't care what makes you tick. You're here to help me catch the superior version of yourself, because I see a scared little boy. You can fix it. Okay?
You're not a serious man.
You're right. I'm a god.
You're a clown.
Can you shut up? Just because I have to work with you doesn't mean I want to hear your voice. You idiot!
There's nothing wrong with a little self-deprecating humor and a little self-referential parody. Unfortunately, the MCU has become a parody, though, because it isn't done out of fun or humor. You can feel the disdain for Loki, the disdain for the traditional characters, the disdain for traditional heroes, the disdain for the audience. Again, Loki is a bait and switch on a lot of levels, including the most obvious. Loki doesn't star in his own show, and Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston just being lost little puppies, playing second fiddle to, let's be real here, a couple of bland, uninspiring, contrived characters in Girl Boss and female Loki. Tell me, did you tune in to see Tom Hiddleston with Owen Wilson, or did you tune in to see Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson tell us how awesome their female counterparts are?
I feel like I'm always looking up to you. I like it. It's appropriate.
Before Loki got kicked in the balls multiple times, he tried to tell Mobius that he's a variant. He didn't believe him, but then later he does when he hears it from Body Positivity Time Cop. By the way, I haven't mentioned this, but there's a big subplot between Mobius and Girl Boss. There might be some office romance or something going on. Obviously, they both have past lives. Obviously, Girl Boss knows more than she's letting on, but this goes nowhere. So much so, I don't even want to bring it up because it's pointless to the story. Most of their scenes, as with most of the scenes in this show, are just those two sitting in a room, and the scenes are just repetitive. Mobius gets caught going through Girl Boss's temp pad, and he gets killed. Female Loki and inconsequential male Loki finally get taken to the Timekeepers, who everyone at this point knew were fake. We find this out after yet another poorly choreographed action scene. They are terrible in this show. Inconsequential male Loki winces at a severed robot head. Male Loki is about to tell female Loki that he loves himself, and then he gets pruned by Girl Boss. There's finally a stinger in this episode, and we finally see other Lokis, the thing they strongly alluded to in the trailers but haven't delivered yet, and we're at the 5th episode. Remember the Loki trailers? Well, I hope you have. I've been playing them throughout this entire review. Remember what they alluded to? That's why I thought this was going to be the best Marvel series, but I am obviously an idiot and naive. Remember the DB Cooper scene, and remember President Loki, especially after that crazy election we had last year. Well, turns out that the scenes you saw in the trailer were pretty much the scenes we saw in this show. Complete throwaway. The DB Cooper scene was just in the first episode when Loki was sitting there watching much better MCU, and the multiple Lokis led by President Loki were in this episode for a grand total of about 4 minutes. They ended up fighting each other and they were gone. I know there was little alligator Loki and Kid Loki and Richard E. Grant 616 Loki, who was great, and that's what makes this terrible. When a guest star steals your entire series and has a sacrifice that has more emotional impact than anything else in your series, and it ended up being for nothing. Apparently, when you get pruned, you go to the end of time, where you get eaten by Eliath, a cloud monster, to go into the Cloud Monster Hall of Fame with Galactus and Parallax. Female Loki and Girl Boss had a showdown, but then female Loki pruned herself and she ended up in the same place with Loki, magically finding him pretty quickly. And of course, Owen Wilson's Mobius is still alive, and he ended up just playing Driving Miss Loki this episode. And to pick up where male Loki left off, he started praising her immediately. Just like on the planet Lamentis, where death was raining down on them, we have a giant purple smoke monster eating reality, constantly threatening them, so they have to run, but they always find time to sit down and talk. The Lokis sit down and talk before the other Lokis show up in the very brief scene where we have all of our lovable Lokis together, all of the different variants. They all have one commonality. They're male, and they are a lot of lovable losers. So, of course, we find out that the one key difference, the one thing that might break their losing streak, is the female Loki.
I'm the same as all of you. Have any of you met a woman variant of us?
Sounds terrifying.
Oh, she is. That's kind of what's great about her. She's different.
You know, times are changing. Ladies can do stuff now.
They all fight and kill each other, and then we're down to Kid Loki, Alligator Loki, and 616 Richard E. Grant Loki, which is the best. They were betrayed by Black Loki. What are they trying to say? Driving Miss Loki, Owen Wilson, and female Loki finally find male inconsequential Loki with the 616 Loki, Alligator Loki, and Kid Loki, and they sit down and talk. That's only interrupted by male Loki and female Loki sitting down and talking somewhere else. While male Loki and female Loki sit down and talk, male Loki gets cold.
It's cold.
And I half expected female Loki to conjure him a blanket. Now he conjured himself one, just to remind you once again, what, a couple of days ago, he was in New York doing this.
You want to find out?
Turns out female Loki had a temp pad. She offers it to Loki. He says he's going to stay, so he offers it to Owen Wilson, who goes back to the TVA, and I did not mean that to rhyme. That's the second video in a row I did that. Male Loki and female Loki face off against the giant purple smoke monster, and male Loki stands behind her. And the coolest scene in this entire series is Richard E. Grant 616 Loki mystically rebuilding Asgard to distract the giant purple smoke monster as female Loki and her companion male Loki enchant it. 616 Loki dies, and female Loki and inconsequential male Loki look through a crack in time and space to Dr. Doom's castle? No. We wish. Actually, I don't. No, it's the Citadel at the end of time. I guess I could say the 5th episode was the best for all the wrong reasons. It was the best because it had the promise of what this show was supposed to be but wasn't, and that seems to be the MO of Disney+. We finally make it to the finale. Will we get any answers, or will there be some on-the-nose scene with the bad guy eating an apple? In the finale, are they done putting Tom Hiddleston's male Loki in his place? Absolutely not.
Okay, shut up. I was pruned before you even existed. I have been waiting for this moment my entire life. I just need a second to get my head straight, okay?
Sure, of course.
She-Loki and Boy Loki debate breaking into the castle, but they're let in by Miss Minutes, who offers them everything they wanted. Baby boy Loki is offered victory against the Avengers and Thanos. Femme Fatale Loki is offered her life back. Of course, girly girl Loki doesn't believe Miss Minutes and says we have our life in our hands and it's all about free will. And we're reminded that absolutely everything in this show and in the MCU has been predetermined. Are we going to eventually get an answer to this? Are we going to find out that that really isn't the case? Or is this episode just going to confirm it? Well, spoilers, it does. After the last temptation of the Lokis, they walk around the castle for a little bit, and then they finally meet a bad guy eating an apple. Miss Loki and Master Loki follow our on-the-nose apple eater into the elevator and then slowly follow him to his office and then slowly follow him to his desk. And at the 12-minute mark, they finally sit down at the desk. And soon as they're about to actually start talking, they cut away to Mobius and Girl Boss. Mobius goes to Pruner.
You're of no danger to me.
Of course he isn't, because he's male.
Is that what you think? Let's see. Yep, you're right. Back here again.
Then she takes off. He asks, where are you gonna go? And she said, in search of free will. I could have sworn Girl Boss just said, there's no such thing as free will. Now she's in search of it? Like I said, pointless. There was another scene where Body Positivity Time Cop confronts Girl Boss as, I guess, her real self, a principal of a school. And they don't go back to these scenes again. I don't care enough to be confused. I know they're supposed to be cliffhangers, but one essential thing about a cliffhanger is I have to care about Girl Boss and female Loki, and as they were written, that is impossible. It doesn't get much better from here. We spend the rest of the episode with the two Lokis talking to the unnamed Kang the Conqueror about stuff. It turns out Loki gave us the entire plot back in episode 3.
Your years in the making plan was to tear the place down, create the ultimate power vacuum, and then just walk away.
The only difference was the timekeepers were the unnamed Kang the Conqueror. We can only assume he is Kang because he didn't give us his name. On the nose apple eater unnamed Kang tells us that he paved the way for female Loki and inconsequential male Loki to arrive at that desk, meaning there was absolutely no free will in this show, and there remains no free will in the MCU. Now, I'm assuming this might be the Immortus version of Kang, which most of you are not going to know, and it doesn't really matter anyway. There's a lot of versions of Kang. He is descended from Reed Richards, which should give us all a big hint on just how they're going to cast that Fantastic Four movie. But we're not really sure. It could be the character in name only, just like they did with the Iron Maiden in Black Widow, or the Taskmaster, or Ravonna Renslayer, who just so happens to be a redhead in the comic books. Ginger's side is real. Or the Enchantress from the comics, whose name is Sylvie, who they plucked to make female Loki. In the interest of saving time, because this video has gone on long enough, Immortus or Kang or whoever he is offers our Lokis a deal. It turns out the TVA was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, except it wasn't the timekeepers who was running it, it was Immortus or Kang. He offers them his job, or they could kill him and it will restart the multiverse war, which was started by Kang, Rama Tut, Nathaniel Richards, Immortus, whoever you want to call him. And because they needed to break the monotony, female Loki and male Loki fight. Female Loki wants revenge. Male Loki says, I just want you to think about it. She, of course, kicks his ass. And ultimately, he finishes what he was trying to say before he got pruned. That's right. He says he loves himself, then he kisses himself, and proving that female Loki is the star of the show, she, with Kang's wrist device that she somehow figured out how to use, boots male Loki out of the room, and then she kills Kang, Immortus, Nathaniel Richards, Rama Tut, whoever he is. Technically, in the credits, it's he who remains. The multiverse starts splitting up. Loki gets another good cry in, then he runs over to Mobius and Body Positivity Time Cop, and they have no idea who he is, and we see a giant statue of Kang the Conqueror, and we're gonna get a Loki season 2, and I don't care. And if this is your big bad, if this is the guy you chose to play your next Thanos, I certainly hope he has a lot of range, because Jonathan Majors' performance was awful.
And that's the gambit. Stifling order or cataclysmic chaos.
And according to the show, he is supposed to be terrifying.
We found him. Beyond the storm. A citadel at the end of time. He's terrifying.
And Loki, the show about the god of lies, the trickster, the god of mischief, ended up being about female Loki, and it ended up being predictable and boring. This series could have worked, and it should have worked. I have no problem with a kick-ass female Loki as long as we have a kick-ass Loki to go along with it. But it seems that Hollywood, and especially Disney Marvel of late, feels it's necessary to deconstruct and destroy their male characters because they have no respect for their female characters. They have no respect for women. They don't think they can stand on their own along with their male characters. I don't know. Disney, you answer the question. I know what you're thinking. That wasn't so bad. WandaVision actually started out promising. And yeah, sure, it turned into a moral quagmire at the end because the writers in Hollywood don't know things like good from bad. And a lot of people might have liked Loki mostly because they like Tom Hiddleston and they really wanted to see him be emasculated, admit that he's bisexual, and pay second fiddle to the real Loki, female Loki, which is just a variant of the Loki character. So when those two eventually hook up, he's just fucking himself. And that's the gambit. And sure, the Loki series did minor little things like completely destroying the canon and characters of the MCU. The Infinity Stones were paperweights, and every character's actions was due to Kane's will because they had none of their own. Too bad this show has aged poorly, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jonathan Majors' improprieties leading to him being let go, but the real reason he should have been fired is because he was a terrible Kang. But let's be fair, despite the fact that Disney owns things like Freeform and ABC, and they've put Marvel shows on those networks and made Marvel shows for Netflix, Kevin Feige's Disney Marvel has never really made TV shows before. So maybe they just needed to get their legs under them and work some things out, and they'll get better. Or maybe not. So if you were looking for that hard, gritty, violent Clint Barton Hawkeye series, which his character really does deserve because he's one of the most underdeveloped characters in the MCU, well, this isn't it because it's the Kate Bishop show. Come on! Hawkeye is the 5th and final Marvel series to air on Disney Plus this year. And if you count Sony films, we've already gotten 4 Marvel movies this year with 1 to go. That's a lot of Marvel, and while there are people who of course are going to love this series because at least they try to have fun in this, it still suffers from what is Marvel's biggest problem this year. Is it Marvel fatigue? No. Is it superhero fatigue? No. It's bad storytelling fatigue. And maybe that has something to do with Disney stock slumps after streaming growth falls. Disney shares sank as much as 9% Thursday after media conglomerate posted earnings that missed Wall Street expectations and revealed a significant slowdown in its flagship Disney Plus streaming service. Now, to be fair to Disney, they never said they were going to give us something hard and gritty. We always knew we were going to get a PG Hawkeye that was supposed to be the Die Hard of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the only thing it has in common with Die Hard is Christmas. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with Jeremy Renner's performance or Haley Seinfeld's, who gives a good effort at making the character Kate Bishop not as insufferable as she is in the comic books. I really can't blame the character. What's truly insufferable is modern writing in modern Marvel comic books. How insufferable is it? I am literally intrigued and in awe of both of them. If this is what it's like to date other women, then I applaud all women dating other women right now because this is incredible. Motorcycle courtship, chase, check. Missiles and explosions, yup. And now we're just flying together in the sky to a giant heart. I swear if they come back married, I'm going to be so jealous. And never mind, we have comics written now where it's totally okay to kill innocent store clerks and blue-collar workers in the name of the environment. The Hawkeye series is loosely based on Matt Fraction's run back in 2012 that I sold in my shop. It was very well received. It sold pretty decently, and I thought it was a bit overhyped, but okay. Who's Matt Fraction? Well, he's Mr. Kelly Sue DeConnick.
Would you please get your politics out of my comic books? I'm like, what comic books are you reading?
I'm fine, I just,
And if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. Problem solved.
threw up in my mouth a little bit.
I would say so far in the first 2 episodes, Hawkeye is a loose adaptation of the Fraction run mixed in with the MCU, with a lot of MCU sprinkled in. The episode starts out in 2012. We get a little family moment with young Kate Bishop. We see her dad and her mom having an argument because her dad is obviously a loser and has some bad business dealing, and they might have to sell the penthouse they're in. Parents figure out Kate's eavesdropping. Dad goes upstairs, gives some fatherly advice, and then goes downstairs and dies because we can't have any good dads in Marvel, which I suppose is an improvement on the dad from the comics who has criminal dealings that lead to Kate Bishop getting kidnapped. He dies because this is the day of the Battle of New York City now. Before Kate gets taken away by her mom, she sees Hawkeye in action, giving Kate a bit of a hero complex, and at her dad's funeral, she asks for a bow and arrow. Then we head into the credits, and this is how I know it's the Kate Bishop show guest starring Hawkeye, because the opening credits are a montage of her origin. Cut to present day, and we're still on Kate Bishop because this is the Kate Bishop show. She's in college, she climbs a wall, she knocks down a bell in a bell tower, gets in a little trouble, says she's sorry to mom, and then goes to a charity auction. At this point, my normie friend, you're probably wondering, why is Kate Bishop called Hawkeye and Clint Barton called Hawkeye? Why can't they give Kate Bishop a different name like they did with Roy Harper in The Green Arrow, calling him Speedy and then Red Arrow and then eventually Arsenal? Short answer, they were lazy. Then we finally get to Hawkeye, Clint Barton's Hawkeye. He's with his family at Rogers the Musical, and we need to stop right there. It's not Captain Rogers, it's Steve Rogers, Captain America. There have been plenty of attempts to get new Captain Americas in Marvel Comics, even recently with Sam Wilson, and it's never worked because Steve Rogers is Captain America, just like Clint Barton is Hawkeye and Peter Parker is Spider-Man. There's a reason Kate Bishop is known as Kate Bishop and Miles Morales is known as Miles Morales. Couple Rogers the Musical with Sprite calling him Captain Rogers in the Eternals.
So now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are both gone, who do you think's gonna lead the Avengers?
And it's pretty clear Disney doesn't want you to refer to Steve Rogers as Captain America anymore. I wonder why is that? I digress. So Clint Barton and his family are watching Rogers the Musical. It's meant to be cheesy, but I don't know if Disney realizes that Disney Plus Marvel series are the Rogers Musical within the MCU. As with all Disney Plus series, there is a good concept buried beneath the overall Disney of everything. Back to Kate Bishop, because it's the Kate Bishop show, and we're off to a charity auction with her mom and the swordsman from Marvel Comics, Jack Duquesne. This is where we get to my favorite part of both episodes, the auction heist, and yes, that's sarcasm. Now, Kate Bishop, like I said, has a hero complex. She hears somebody threatening her mom, so she follows this person, Armand Duquesne, who is Jack Duquesne's uncle, down to a black market auction. I don't know if this is part of the charity auction or not, where they're selling dinosaur skulls and the Ronin sword and costume, which were found in the wreckage of the Avengers mansion, making the Avengers the most irresponsible superhero team of all time, aside from not telling any countries, governments, organizations, or any other planets that you're bringing back half of the population of the universe. You also decide to just leave all of your shit around at the wreckage of your mansion. What'd you do? Just walk away? Again, I digress. Kate Bishop is snooping around this auction. She walks past a room where she sees some guys getting ready for something, and then one of the walls just explodes. After the wall explodes, our thieves are looking for a watch. You know how I know they're looking for a watch?
We've got 90 seconds to find a watch. Everything else is secondary.
That's right. The thieves who were observed in a room getting ready together and then went ahead and put masks on decided to tell us exactly what they were looking for and exactly how much time they were looking for it. During the confusion, Jack Duquesne steals the Ronin sword and Kate Bishop puts on the Ronin costume and starts fighting bad guys. We're not only shown in the animated montage origin that Kate is amazing, we're constantly told how amazing she is. That is MCU. This brings us to the first fight scene where the very green Kate Bishop, who just put on that costume, takes on 5 or 6 armed guys who weigh about 50 to 100 pounds more than she does. There's a part where she's fighting with wine bottles, and I think this is showing off her skills. I like this, and I will also note I wish they would have done that a lot more with Hawkeye as well. But then there's this. And this. And this.
This is bullshit.
Oh, but she's not done fighting off 300-pound Russian guys. Remember that watch they were looking for? I'm sure you haven't forgotten. Well, one of the burglars ends up finding it, but then Deus Ex dog comes in and randomly attacks him for no particular reason, and I'm not really sure what happened to the watch after this point, and they don't bring it up again. Kate saves the dog, somebody gets it on video, and that's important later. The act of saving the one-eyed dog, who's later named Lucky the Pizza Dog, saves Kate Bishop, but not before the bad guys see her, and we know the bad guys see her because one of the bad guys takes off his mask while all his friends yell his name so the audience could get a good look at Kazi, a character from the comics.
They're so stupid!
In the meantime, Clint sees on the news that Ronin is back and saving dogs. Now, this is something that's actually compelling that I would be interested in if this was the entire series. Now, once Clint sees Ronin on the news, there's a quick flashback of Ronin in Endgame. And the news lets us know that after terrorizing the New York Underground, Ronin hasn't been seen in years. So after accidentally stumbling into an auction that is selling black market Avengers costumes and weapons, then it gets broken into, then she puts on a costume and then beats off bad guys for the first time and then escapes and saves some dogs. She decides to go off to Armand's apartment where Armand is dead. Somebody comes home, so Kate has to leave. It's very important to point out that before she found Armand's body, she randomly comes across some monogrammed candy, which I'm sure will come into play later. This amazing decorated collegiate athlete gets caught once again by the Tracksuit Mafia, who are called the Tracksuit Draculas in the comics, and I prefer that name. She beats the crap out of them again, and then she locks herself in a car. The Tracksuit Mafia, not being the sharpest tools in the shed, completely forgot that they brought baseball bats to beat up Kate, and they didn't use them to break into the car. They also forgot that they had guns. Clint comes in and saves the day, drags her into an alley, and finds out that Ronin is a girl. What? That's right. The New York media, the Tracksuit Mafia, and Clint all thought this was a boy, and there's some actors in Hollywood where this would probably be totally acceptable, but this is Haley Steinfeld we're talking about. Then we get to the second episode where not much happens. The first two episodes are really all about taking 2 steps forward, then 5 steps back. This one slows to an absolute crawl, so I'll be brief as possible. After the opening scene where Kate takes Clint back to her apartment and Clint explains to her that the Ronin costume has a lot of history and it's dangerous, the Tracksuit Mafia catches up with them again. Once again, they forgot they had guns, but they do have Molotov cocktails, and they set the apartment on fire. Kate, Clint, and the dog are able to escape, but they had to leave behind the costume. And instead of, say, the Tracksuit Mafia getting the costume and doing something compelling, no, a firefighter ended up stealing the costume, and Clint has to go to some LARPing thing to get it back. They waste most of the episode doing this. I guess Disney's
perfect mix of creative excellence enhanced by data-driven audience insights
concluded that nerds like cosplay and LARPing, instead of really digging into Ronin's past and maybe showing what he did over the last 5 years, I'm guessing those Avengers Endgame flashbacks are all we're going to see. And instead, we're getting a character study of Clint Barton, who is racked with guilt over that stuff we're not going to see. I mean, 10 minutes was spent on that LARPing scene, and it was completely pointless. The other half is spent on Kate trying to unravel the mystery of what happened to Armand, and she automatically suspects Jack is up to something. Her mom either doesn't notice this at all because she's clueless or is in on it, and I'm guessing she's in on it. So there's this fencing scene between Jack and Kate. Jack is taking it easy on her, and she gets pissed off, so she tries to stab him in the face, and he disarms her, and that pisses her off even more, and she's trying to prove to her mom that Jack is hiding something. Now, remember Armand's monogrammed candy that Kate found that I said would come up later? Well, it comes up later. Jack offers her one after being forced to apologize to Jack, so Jack just admitted to the daughter of his fiance that he murdered his uncle, or it could be nothing. I guess we'll find out. And this is probably how it's going to go down. Jack thinks he's gaming Kate's mom, but Kate's mom is really gaming Jack. Kate's mom's the head of a security company, so that's why she has access to all these magical apps that can just track anybody anywhere, which makes things very convenient for plot. I don't know why. It's not like Jack has much to offer. Early on, Armand said he didn't have any money, but we all know that outside of our main titular characters, all Disney men are either duplicitous, weak, incompetent, evil, or incompetently evil. Clint had to send his family home, and he has 5 days until Christmas to fix this mess. because he promised to be home. So he tells his wife he's going to do a catch and release, and he gets himself caught on purpose by the Tracksuit mafia. Kate goes to save him and fails miserably, and she ends up getting caught too. And she somehow manages to survive a 30-foot drop without a scratch. So both Clint and Kate are captured, and we heard earlier that she wants them alive, which I just assume because this is a Disney Plus series and there's no shortage of girl bosses. This brings us to the final scene, and I don't know if I was supposed to be impressed with this or this was supposed to be ominous. They told us in the closed captioning that ominous music was playing, but all I felt was nothing. This is supposed to be Marvel Comics, the realm of the extraordinary. Instead, we have the realm of the incredibly average. This is Echo, who is basically Lady Daredevil and Bullseye mix in a little bit of Elektra. In the comics, she doesn't have the most iconic costume in the world, but it's better than this. And this rounds out every Disney Plus series having a female villain. MCU, first it was Agatha. Remember, it was Agatha all along. Then we had Freckle Jesus. Then we had female Loki. All of these female villains have been previously victimized by either unjust systems or unjust men. And now we have Echo, who is, you guessed it, another previously victimized female villain. This brings us to the third episode, and guess what? We get another origin of a Z-list character in the Hawkeye show. You know who hasn't had a proper origin in the MCU? Hawkeye. That's right, we spend the first 8 minutes of this episode getting to know Echo, who definitely was a forerunner of the MCU back in Marvel Comics. Remember that cringe Taskmaster reveal in Black Widow?
Oh, no, 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 no.
Well, they had something very similar happen a decade back in a comic called The New Avengers with the original Ronin when it was revealed to be Echo. And that reveal went down in my comic shop about as well as the Taskmaster reveal went down. A lot of chuckles, a lot of rolled eyes. Echo has the same powers as the Taskmaster. She can mimic movements. She is deaf and the actress has a prosthetic leg, so therefore Echo has a prosthetic leg. So everything of note in the third episode, Echoes, happens in about the first 10 minutes. After getting to know a very young Echo, we do indeed get another Ronin flashback. Now in the comics, the Kingpin killed Echo's father and then raises her. In this show, she's raised by her father, and in that flashback scene, she witnesses Ronin killing him. Now I have to wait for the context before I judge this too harshly, but as it stands right now, I hate this. Why do I hate something that could be interesting? Well, maybe it has something to do with Disney's past record of deconstructing established male characters.
Down with the patriarchy.
Now they present Echo's dad in this show as some sort of soulful saint who just happens to work for a criminal organization. As with most Marvel things these days, the most talked about thing about this series is a cameo. Jangling keys, the possibility of the Kingpin showing up, or possibly Charlie Cox from Daredevil. I want to caution everyone, remember Mephisto, remember Jack Schaefer, the writer for WandaVision, didn't even know who he was, yet everyone was convinced he was going to show up. Yes, we did get the Quicksilver cameo, and that fell flat on its face. So when people want Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin or Charlie Cox's Daredevil in a Disney Plus series, be prepared to be disappointed because you will never see something as good as Daredevil on Disney Plus. On Disney Plus, Vanessa will be the Kingpin. And in the third episode, we did indeed get a Kingpin cameo, his arm, and a little laugh. That was most definitely Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. Before you get too excited, I just want to ask you one question. Do you think we're going to see the Kingpin decapitate a guy with a car door on Disney Plus? Again, Daredevil Season 1 was a masterpiece because it will go places Disney will never go, not even on Hulu. On Disney Plus, you can't even go hard PG-13, much less hard rated R. So we're back in present day in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I believe is 2025. And no, I don't have any idea what impact Kang has on this series. Apparently, the multiverse should be unraveling right now, but maybe they have it worked out. So Kate and Clint are being held captive by the Tracksuit Mafia while they wait for Echo. And I guess she made them wait all night because it was nighttime at the end of the second episode, and it's daytime at the beginning of the third episode. Clint, of course, is duct taped to a unicorn because we can't go 5 minutes without subtly or not so subtly emasculating a man on a Disney Plus show. And we're still on this Ronin costume thing, and this is starting to drag a bit because we all know Clint was Ronin, and it's all about waiting for the other characters to figure out what we already know. But we're not quite at the Clint's world closing in on a moment, which we probably should be considering we're almost halfway through the series, and we're still on the trying to convince everyone Kate is not Ronan, which is obvious. Clint tells Echo that Ronan is dead and he was killed by Black Widow, and he knows this because he was there. Echo and Kazi aren't buying it because they think the story's a little bit too convenient. After properly chastising Kate Bishop for her overconfidence, Clint finally escapes. At about the 15-minute mark at the episode, something actually happens. Clint fires his first arrow in the Hawkeye show, only after getting his ass beat by Echo. And we have a cutesy fight scene in the abandoned KB Toys where people are throwing stuffed animals at each other, falling in ball pits, and fighting each other with shopping carts. And yes, people do have guns, but there's no danger of them actually shooting anybody. This is Disney+. And after finally seeing Hawkeye shoot some arrows in the Hawkeye show, we're off to the car chase scene that everyone's watched on YouTube. Now, Hawkeye is going deaf due to his past exploits, and his hearing aid is broken during the fight with Echo. And prior to fighting, Echo counsels him a little bit on his hearing aid, telling him to ditch it and just rely on his senses. So Clint is driving and he can't hear Kate. She's firing off all the trick arrows, and I'm pretty sure she murdered somebody here. The car chase ends with the Avenger Clint Barton and the novice yet highly decorated collegiate athlete Kate Bishop jumping off a bridge. And the rest of the episode is pretty much people sitting around and talking. Although on the train, Clint does indeed tell Kate she is one of the world's best archers.
You're not wrong. Call yourself one of the world's greatest archers.
Over lunch, Kate and Clint are talking. She tries to convince him that he's an inspiration, although he says he's not a role model. She once again talks about his branding problem and designs him a costume. Then Disney Marvel decides to use this as a moment to clown Hawkeye's original costume. And I hate this on so many levels. It reminds me of this.
Sorry, what was your name again?
Dr. Otto Octavius.
Wait, no, seriously, what's your actual name?
Remember when superheroes wore costumes and Marvel took itself seriously? Yeah, it seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Later on, we get a conversation between Kazi and Echo where Kazi reminds her that she shouldn't take too much time on this personal vendetta to find out who Ronan is because, of course, Ronan killed her father. And then she has to remind him who is Girl Boss.
You are.
Now that they've escaped the Tracksuit Mafia for what is the third or fourth time in 3 episodes, we're back to the did Jack kill his Uncle Armand thing, which is something I honestly could care less about. And after breaking into Kate's mom's flat and hacking her computer, the episode ends with Jack holding a sword to Clint's throat. And if you walk away from this episode feeling like you've seen a lot of it, well, you have, especially that car chase scene, which has been out for a couple of months on YouTube. The good in this series, at least it attempts to have fun. I think Jeremy Renner's character is shown a very surprising reverence that I appreciate. I think Haley Steinfeld is charming at times and annoying at other times. And I can see why a lot of people were comparing this to a Netflix series that isn't Daredevil season 1 and 2, because it seems like it's about an hour and a half of plot stretched out over 6 episodes. The bad in this series, the entire second episode was unnecessary. That could have been dealt with in 5 minutes. Then there's all the contrived moments in the first episode. So the Avengers just left all their stuff behind after Avengers Endgame. Kate just happens upon a black market auction that's selling the Ronin sword and costume. Oh, and the costume fits. And Deus Ex dogs who just happened to attack the Tracksuit Mafia guy right when he found the watch. Clint seeing a LARPing sticker on a fire truck leading him to the entire unnecessary LARPing scene. And the monogrammed candy. And the stories are going to get more contrived as we get these tokenized and derivative characters.
Bottom of the barrel woke garbage.
Pew.
As with most of the D+ series, Hawkeye showed a little bit of promise, and Haley Steinfeld wasn't that insufferable as Kate Bishop, and she ended up not being the worst thing in this series. The worst thing in this series is the writing, the directing, the editing, and the action sequences, especially in the finale where it's downright embarrassing. Disney+ is Marvel's version of the CW.
You ain't lying.
Not to bury the lead on this one, but the biggest news out of the Hawkeye series is Kingpin and his deconstruction in a matter of minutes. Now, in the first 3 episodes, they at least showed some reverence for for the character of Hawkeye. Well, that's all out the window, and because there was a shortage of female characters, we needed to add one more. And in the final 3 episodes of the Kate Bishop show, it even loses focus on Kate Bishop and ends up being an epilogue to that horrible Black Widow movie that lost money. The Hawkeye finale, coming out on the same week as Spider-Man No Way Home, really shines a light on the failures of the MCU, and it shows you what success really looks like when you honor the past, respect the fans, and give them what they want instead of subverting everything. Our series stars Haley Steinfeld as the very capable and strong Kate Bishop, a Hawkeye fangirl who's also a highly decorated athlete and master archer who runs like a duck. Clint Barton, the guest star in this series, is matched up with Kate Bishop, who miraculously, through a series of contrived events, ends up wearing the Ronin costume after the Avengers irresponsibly left all of their stuff behind after the final battle in Endgame. Kate Bishop is unaware that Clint Barton is trying to clean up his Ronin past while trying to protect her all at the same time. The rest of the cast is rounded out with Eleanor Bishop, Kate's mom, the strong and capable head of a security company in New York; Echo, or Maya Lopez, the very strong and capable leader of a group of white male simpletons known as the Tracksuit Mafia; a hero who is not only deaf, she has a prosthetic leg; and a heart of gold despite being the leader of a criminal organization. She's also on a quest to find out the identity of Ronin, who is the killer of her soulful saint yet criminal father. Derek Bishop, Kate's irresponsible father who died during the Battle of New York, leaving his family in debt; Armand Duquesne, the misogynist and duplicitous businessman and uncle to Jack, who threatens Eleanor Bishop and later ends up murdered mysteriously in the first episode; Kazi, the lieutenant of the Tracksuit Mafia and the only member with an IQ above room temperature, who is in love with Maya Lopez but obviously has his secrets. Then there's the Tracksuit Mafia themselves, who Kate Bishop describes as very white and they are very dumb. And to round out the Disney men, who are obviously some variation of either idiotic or evil, is Jack Duquesne, who we are led to believe is some sort of mysterious villain, and Kate Bishop believes he murdered his uncle Armand, who we all know to be an idiot, albeit a charming one. And we left Jack Duquesne with a sword to Clint Barton's throat at the end of the 3rd episode, and that's where we pick up the action with the 4th episode. And this would be a great opportunity to have a little callback to the comics. The swordsman used to be Hawkeye's mentor, and if they had a little fight right now, it might be interesting. And then I remembered this was Disney Plus, and of course they all sit down at a table so Eleanor Bishop can scold Hawkeye and Kate. It had been a minute since they emasculated Hawkeye. I remind you, this is the 4th episode in a 6-episode series, and the bulk of it is spent sitting on couches and talking, walking in a hallway talking, texting, making phone calls, up until the end. So after the awkward conversation at the dinner table, Eleanor Bishop sees Clint Barton out and asks him to drop the case. Clint says he can't do that, but he promises to protect Kate. After she closes the door, we see that Clint was able to steal his sword back. Clint texts his wife to look into a company called Sloan Limited, which we find out that Jack is the CEO of, and Eleanor makes a mysterious phone call to who we all know as the Kingpin. That's followed by Jack, Eleanor, and Kate sitting on a couch and being cute, followed later by Kate Bishop visiting Clint while he's icing up his injuries after his ass beating from Echo and being cute. Then we finally get a display of Clint's skills. No, it's not during a fight. He takes a Christmas ornament and turns off a TV. And we don't see something like that from Clint again. And this is the point where I turn off the episode and head on over to IMDb to see if my suspicions are true, and they are. The writers of this episode, Heather Quinn and Aaron Consino, have 0 writing experience. No, not 0 comic book superhero writing experience, not 0 science fiction and adventure writing experience, hell, not 0 soap opera writing experience. It's 0 writing experience.
Hey, I'm not surprised,
We do get a little more insight to Clint Barton's Hawkeye in this scene. We find out that Hawkeye, the master tactician from the comics, isn't a big planner. And that explains why what should have been the most dramatic scene ended up falling flat when Kate Bishop finds out Clint is Ronin. And of course, that's followed up with our LARPing guild, who only exists to probably fill out any diversity or inclusivity that wasn't covered with the main cast. Clint asks Kate and the LARPing guild to go retrieve his trick arrows.
Wait, What?
That's right. We need to go on a mission to retrieve Clint Barton, Hawkeye's trick arrows because he can't make any more. And this is where I'll ask you, dear viewer, what would you find more interesting? A, Kate Bishop and that wacky, inclusive, and diverse LARPing guild hunting down Clint's trick arrows, or B, Clint MacGyvering his own trick arrows? If you answer B, you might be overqualified to write the next Disney Plus series. Our wacky, inclusive, and diverse LARPing guild, who happens to be filled with first responders and cops, agrees to get the trick arrows in exchange for more cosplay fabric. I said this in my part 1 review, but this reeks of marketing research telling the bankers who don't actually watch any of these shows on Disney Plus that nerds like cosplay.
The creative teams are empowered to make the high-quality, branded entertainment they believe will resonate with audiences.
No. Then we get one of those rare scenes where Hawkeye actually acts like Hawkeye, and if we had a whole series of this, I would like it. Clint confronts Kazi in his car and basically tells him, because he's the closest one to Echo, to tell her to back off or she's dead. Turns out that MacGuffin watch that hasn't really been mentioned since the first episode is important. It can lead anyone to Clint and his family. Clint didn't even realize the watch was gone. His wife had to remember it for him, so he has her ping it, and that leads them to Echo's apartment, which is a surprise to Clint and Kate Bishop when they go stake it out. I'm not sure why you wouldn't look up who lives at the address you're staking out prior to staking it out, but hey, it's Disney Plus storytelling. Kate Bishop gets jumped by Echo in her apartment, and Clint gets jumped by a mysterious figure. That mysterious figure is Florence Pugh from Black Widow. Who could forget Florence Pugh from Black Widow? Oh, I guess a lot of you did, because Black Widow lost money. Spoilers, Black Widow was sent there to kill Clint Barton, and she has multiple opportunities to kill him and doesn't for some reason, and they very conveniently stop fighting for dramatic scenes. Hey, somebody finally gets shot by an arrow, and it's Echo, and she shakes it off like she's Taylor Swift. Then all the parties involved realize there's still 2 episodes left, and they all go their separate ways. It's at this point Clint tells Kate Bishop to go home. Things have gotten too real because somebody's hired a Black Widow assassin. Just like the second episode, the 5th, which is called Ronin, is just filler to get us to the finale. And it takes a hard left turn. The bait and switch Hawkeye show that ends up being the Kate Bishop show turns into an epilogue for Black Widow. And the last thing I want to do while reviewing what ends up being a pretty awful Hawkeye series is discuss the awful Black Widow film again, but we have to. And it's like the Disney Marvel suck has come full circle. It started with Black Widow, which was a giant Me Too times up allegory right down to the Harvey Weinstein-like character, General Dreykov, that I called General Weinsteinoff. Quick reminder, Vostokov, who is Yelena and Natasha's mom, was the one who created the chemical that subjugated the Black Widows. And her mind wasn't chemically subjugated. She did it on her own free will, and she was allowed to walk and go around and free all the Black Widows from the chemical subjugation that she created. Free them to live normal lives, to stop killing people, but apparently that's not the case. We start out back in 2018. Yelena and a partner are there to free another Black Widow from the chemical subjugation, but apparently this one was already freed or didn't need to be freed. So maybe I got the entire theme of Black Widow wrong. I thought it was freeing the women of subjugation so they can go live normal and happy lives, not killing people. No. It's just to free them from the male subjugation. They're still going to kill people. They just don't want men telling them to do it. Female empowerment. Yep, so the 5th episode of the Hawkeye show starts out with 3 women fighting, but at least it's during the day. The 3 women work it out. Then Yelena goes to the bathroom and gets blipped. And when she comes back out, there is a very diverse family in the living room.
Yelena?
Nani?
All this leads up to Yelena finding out Natasha's dead. Now we don't actually see when she finds out, but we see the moment right before she finds out. Then things slow back down to a crawl. Kate Bishop goes home and cries to her mom. Clint goes to one of the LARPers' house to crash out, and then Kate Bishop decides to go back to her apartment where she meets Yelena. Do they slug it out? Of course not. They sit down at a table and have some mac and cheese. It's a little girls' night out. They get to know each other a little bit. Then Yelena says she's gonna kill Clint and tells Kate to stay out of her way and leaves. Aside from them dialing up the MCU in the final 3 episodes, they're just boring and predictable. And remember, they build this as MCU's Die Hard. I'm betting a lot of you have recently watched it in the last week because it is a Christmas movie, and you'll probably remember John McClane running around barefoot using everything at his disposal to defeat the bad guys in the course of one evening. That would have been cool. Hawkeye in the comic books is resourceful. The man can make a weapon out of absolutely anything. And yes, he has a badass costume, and we will get to that. But I doubt Disney sees this as a wasted opportunity because they had no intention of making a Hawkeye series. This simply exists to introduce Kate Bishop, Echo, and Kingpin, and we haven't even gotten to the worst part of this series. There's a moment about halfway through Ronin where Clint goes to the Avengers Monument to talk to Natasha and apologize for what he's about to do, and all I can think of was, how is this even in the same universe as the Avengers? Jack Duquesne finally gets arrested. Obviously, he was set up by Eleanor Bishop, and I know that's supposed to be a big mystery to be revealed at the end of this episode, but we all saw this coming from the first trailer. Clint calls his wife and tells her that Echo has the watch and he has to go put her down, or at least that's the way they make it sound. Kate tries to get back in touch with Hawkeye after Jack gets arrested. Clint tells the Tracksuit Mafia that Ronin wants to meet Echo. There's a little homage to Batman Begins as Ronin takes out the very formidable Tracksuit Mafia. Then he continues to have a hard time with Echo. Clint finally gets her down and warns her to never come after him again as he reveals his identity. I wasn't sure how much I liked the fact that Clint killed Echo's dad, and now that I know the full context, I hate it, especially because they did nothing with it. Basically, what they were saying is Clint knew he was tipped off by the Kingpin to kill his own crew, and he did it anyway. Then Clint gives her the "you and I aren't so different" speech. Our thirst for revenge makes us easily manipulated.
Mango only pawn in game of life.
Echo once again gets the upper hand on Ronin, and of course, Clint has to be saved by Kate Bishop. Oh, and that's not the last time. And in the final scene, Yelena is following Eleanor Bishop, and this is where we get the bombshell revelation that we all saw coming. Eleanor Bishop is working with the Kingpin, and she hired Yelena to kill Clint Barton. What makes this more ridiculous and straight up cartoonish is Yelena tells Kate Bishop that her mother hired her. Like, why the hell would she do that? Because they're friendsies and they had mac and cheese together? Before we get into the finale, let's talk about Daredevil, the single best thing Marvel has produced live action ever. Better than anything in the MCU and definitely better than any of the dreck from D+. It's hard to believe that Netflix and Disney teamed up to make something this good, but it actually happened, and it's not rocket science. It's actually pretty simple. They hired Drew Goddard and Stephen DeKnight, 2 writers who were not only familiar with the character of Daredevil, they liked him.
I grew up reading Daredevil comics, so I knew a lot about them, and I knew the history and the character.
I wasn't sold initially on Charlie Cox, but after about 5 minutes, I was convinced he was Matt Murdock, and Vincent D'Onofrio was genius casting. Mix in bringing in some directors from The Sopranos and Doctor Who when it was good. And again, you not only have the best single series of television Marvel has ever produced, it's one of the best single series of television ever. Because all the hard work that was put into Kingpin over the 3 seasons on Daredevil was completely undone in one episode of a Disney Plus series. Now, when the finale started, I thought I would at least be rewarded with a Kingpin and Hawkeye showdown for sitting through this garbage. I'm so naive. It starts out with Eleanor leaving the Kingpin. He reminds her that this isn't the kind of business you can just leave, and she threatens him with some sort of insurance policy and walks out. And with the revelation that Eleanor Bishop was the mastermind behind everything, including killing Armand Duquesne with her own hands and having the power to summon Julia Louis-Dreyfus's goofy Madam Hydra to hire a Black Widow assassin, that essentially makes her more powerful than the Kingpin. And this solidifies that this is the Kate Bishop show because everything that matters in this story is driven through her character. Disney Marvel doesn't miss a single opportunity to denigrate a previously established male character, even one they fought so hard to get back, like Kingpin. Clearly, Eleanor Bishop was in the position of power in that scene. That's followed by a scene with Echo saying that she's given up looking for Ronan and she needs a couple of days off. Kingpin susses out that she's bailing on him too. Obviously, Echo, the perfectly innocent criminal with a heart of gold, took what Clint had to say to heart. I remind you, it's Clint Barton, played by guest star Jeremy Renner in the Kate Bishop show. He's essentially reduced to a human MacGuffin. Kate's still reeling from the news that her mom's Cruella and a criminal mastermind, and this is the point where Clint finally says he and Kate Bishop are partners.
Kate, you're my partner. I'm gonna come.
And I'd just like to point out what an understanding wife Laura Barton is. Now, I can understand her being cool with Clint's relationship to Natasha, considering that she and Laura were probably co-workers. But it's one thing to help a girl in need, and another thing to mix drinks with her and decorate a tree. It also turns out that Clint not only has the equipment, but he's perfectly capable of making trick arrows. So what the hell were they doing before? Oh yeah, just filling time. I'm so glad I don't pay for this. So Kingpin essentially tells Kazi to kill Echo, and he's going to remind the city that it belongs to him. And the final showdown is going to take place at Eleanor Bishop's Christmas party that Clint and Kate have infiltrated with the Inclusive and Diverse LARPing Guild. And this big final battle at the Christmas party and on an ice rink is just embarrassingly bad. Yelena shows up to the party, so does Jack Duquesne, freshly bailed out of jail with a sword. Kate tracks down her mom and confronts her about everything, and of course, it's Dad's fault because he got in debt to the Kingpin.
Misery, misery, misery.
With the exception of Sony's Spider-Man No Way Home, it seems I say this about pretty much everything that came out from Marvel this year. This is where things go off the rails. Kazi has a sniper rifle and he starts taking shots at the party while the Tracksuit Mafia attacks, and everybody breaks into multiple fights, and it starts out with Clint versus Kazi, and I was impressed. Clint's actually fighting a dude. Come to think of it, when Clint was in his Ronin persona, he was able to cut through the Yakuza, the Cartel, and the MS-13 like they were butter, but we did find his weakness: short women. Kate catches up with Yelena, trying to keep her from killing Clint, and they have a cutesy little fight on their way down the building with that on-brand Marvel humor.
Ow! That really hurt.
Yelena's able to jump out of the building gracefully. Kate Bishop, not so much, and Clint gets caught in a Christmas tree. And once again, yes, I am fully aware that this is loosely based on the Matt Fraction Hawkeye run because I sold it in my comic shop. With the Tracksuit Draculas who called each other bro and had the Trust a Bro moving service. And I made quite a few videos last year warning something like this would happen because the comic books were the proving ground for all the identity politics and intersectional feminism. And I'll say it again, Disney has skipped decades of great Marvel comics with stories that sold in the millions to get to stories that sold in the thousands and led to the catastrophe that is the modern comic book industry. So the Tracksuit Mafia attacks Kate and Clint on the ice rink. Well, if you consider an attack running up, then standing still and waiting for somebody to shoot a trick arrow at you, this is just embarrassing. Speaking of embarrassing, this is the moment where we finally see Hawkeye in his purple costume. And Clint looks like he's about to go skating on that ice. What the hell is that? What is it? You know, there are real LARPing guilds and cosplayers out there that can make a better costume, like this and this and this. Meanwhile, Echo shows up to confront Kazi about lying to her about her dad. She asks him to quit the Tracksuit Mafia and ride away with her. He says he can't do that. They fight, then she kills him, and then she cries, and then she drives off into inexplicably her own series. And now it's time for the matchup we've all been waiting for. No, not Hawkeye versus Kingpin. Kate Bishop versus Kingpin. And Hawkeye versus Yelena. That's right. In the same week, we saw all three Spider-Men, all Peter Parkers, by the way, team up to fight Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, Electro, Sandman, mix in a little Doctor Strange too. We get Kate Bishop versus Kingpin. And I gotta admit, Kate Bishop can take a beating, a lot better than Daredevil could. He throws her around the room. She should have been jelly by the time he was done with her, but she just kind of gets up, dusts herself off, and she's able to blow him up with a bunch of trick arrows. Yes, Eleanor Bishop did hit him with a car, but still, he's Kingpin, and what are we doing here? In the meantime, Clint Barton and Yelena fight to a cry-off.
I loved her so much.
Me too.
That's right, little Florence Pugh beats the crap out of Hawkeye because she's convinced he killed her sister. For a Black Widow trained assassin, she's not very good at it. She didn't do any research on Clint Barton. She let Kate Bishop know who the hell she is, and she didn't kill her. Oh, we're not done snipping off the Kingpin's balls. Right after he gets blown up by Kate Bishop, he gets away and he's confronted by Echo, who we're made to believe shoots him. Right before he pleads for his life.
You and I were family.
Great introduction into the MCU for Kingpin, Kevin Feige. And because it's been a while since Kate Bishop has been praised, Clint Barton tells her she makes him better. I can't help but wonder what Clint's wife thinks about something like that. Well, I could tell you what my wife and any other wife would do in this situation if I was hanging out with some 22-year-old hottie, decorating Christmas trees, mixing drinks, and telling her she makes me better. We'd wake up on fire. Speaking of Clint's wife, oh yeah, the watch was hers and she worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. and she's Mockingbird. And Hawkeye ends up being just as bad as Loki, the classic bait and switch. Here we are starting our second year of Disney Marvel on Disney Plus, and it couldn't possibly get any worse than last year, could it? You remember last year, don't you? WandaVision started out pretty intriguing and then ended like crap. Falcon and Winter Soldier, quite frankly, was crap beginning to end. Loki was the definition of character assassination, and Hawkeye played out like Marvel on ice. And that was just on Disney Plus, a year of identity politics, a year of bait and switch, a year of MCU. This brings us to the first episode of Moon Knight, starring Oscar Isaacs and the guy who cheated on Uma Thurman. Who is Moon Knight? Quite frankly, one of Marvel's coolest characters that they've never really known what to do with. He started out with 3 alter egos: Mark Spector, the mercenary; Stephen Grant, the billionaire; Jake Lockley, the cab driver, so he could get into the underworld and fight crime. He had a pilot named Frenchie and a really cool helicopter. And by the time Marvel was done with him, they had turned those 3 alter egos into dissociative identity disorder, which was kind of cool. But when all was said and done, they ended up adding a couple of more personas, including Mr. Knight and a little girl, and Frenchie is gay, which honestly wasn't a surprise. Has DC made Alfred gay yet? I mean, I haven't checked Google in the last 30 minutes. Oh, that's right, Gotham High. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some very good stories in the comics, but it's just never had a good, long run like Spider-Man or Daredevil. Anyway, back to Disney Marvel and Moon Knight, and yes, I did just watch the first episode. I'm a regular pleb like everyone else. I didn't get the 4-episode screener, nor would I want it. And I'm very happy to report that you got a very average at best first episode of a Disney Plus Marvel series that will probably end up disappointing everyone. And if I want to wrap it up in a nutshell without any spoilers, a beta male stumbles around through a mystery, gets attacked by some sloppy CGI, then we get 30 seconds of Moon Knight that we saw in the trailer. In better hands, this could have been a brilliant concept. Think Batman meets Fight Club meets The Mummy. This episode was directed by Mohamed Diab, who famously called out the directors of Wonder Woman 1984 and Black Adam for lacking Egyptian representation. And the one thing I didn't notice in this episode was Egyptian representation, unless you count the fake artifacts in the museum. And this episode was written by Jeremy Slater, who co-wrote the awful season 2 of The Umbrella Academy and the even worse Fan 4 Stick.
What are you doing? You crazy?
This episode starts out with a guy with a couple of bracelets and a scale tattoo, taking a shot, breaking a glass, putting that glass in his shoes, and walking off with a cane, and we see it's the character played by the guy who cheated on Uma Thurman. That's Ethan Hawke, by the way, and he does play a character from the comic who's Dr. Arthur Harrow, but it's just Arthur Harrow in this show, and everyone's going to be an expert on him in the next week. After the credits, we meet Stephen Grant. No, not the billionaire Stephen Grant. He is gone, probably because they don't want to make him look like Bruce Wayne, although that would have been much more interesting. They instead made Stephen Grant a very timid gift shop employee. He's got a little pet fish with one fin, which is very important to the story because this episode is called The Goldfish Problem.
Wow.
Every night he puts blue tape on his doors, puts some sand around his bed, and then chains himself in his bed. He goes to work at a museum. He knows a lot about Egyptian mythology. He gets pushed around by his boss.
No, you're bloody useless unless you're actually doing what you're paid to do, which is to sell these to children.
Got it. Since something very familiar happens, it seems like he's a tour guide, but he's really not. Where have I seen that before? Oh, Doctor Who.
Tom,
You're bloody useless.
So, like I said, this is a very competent episode, and maybe a lot of the surprises are ruined for me because I've read the comic books and know about the dissociative identity disorder, but maybe a lot of people don't, and this might come as a surprise to them, and they'll feel better about it. I thought the best thing about the first episode was Oscar Isaacs. I thought he did a pretty good job. I can't really judge the British accent. I know a lot of people are complaining about it, but I'm not British, so I have no idea. I will ask my British friend Mahler. Just kidding, Az. I'll ask Az too. After Steven misses a date with a girl he didn't even realize he asked out, he goes home and tries to keep himself from going to sleep, so he knows something is going on, and to me, it's just obvious. He has multiple identities, whether you read the comic books or not, and we're just waiting for the character to catch up. He finally falls asleep, then he wakes up with a dislocated jaw in Germany, and I'm liking this. Some henchmen who are probably stormtroopers in their spare time start shooting at him and missing badly. He runs off into a town where he sees a crowd of people, and then we see our bad guy, Ethan Hawke, who comes off as some kind of cult leader. He's got people bowing to him and touching him, and he wants to make the earth as close to heaven as possible. Don't we all? Oscar Isaac Stevens spends most of this episode kind of like the audience, just getting our bearings, trying to figure out what's going on, and it works for the most part. Turns out Arthur Harrow's character in this show is the avatar for the goddess Ammit, the Eater of Souls, who wants to go all Minority Report. Stephen witnesses Arthur judge a couple of people. One's a good man and walks away, and the other one doesn't walk away. She gets her soul eaten. Not that she did anything wrong. Ammit judges all of her life, past, present, and future. I didn't know Ammit could judge. I thought that was Anubis in the Old Kingdom, and then Osiris later on. I'm sorry, I'm not an expert. I'm just kind of into this stuff. One of the henchmen tells Arthur that they were unable to make the exchange. We find out it's an amulet that was stolen by Stephen Grant in another persona that we don't quite know yet. Arthur recognizes him as a mercenary. Stephen Grant has no idea what's going on. He says, I just work in a gift shop. Stephen tries to give him the amulet, and then we hear the voice of F. Murray Abraham, who is Khonshu.
You will give him nothing.
Who's Khonshu? He's an Egyptian moon god, and Moon Knight is his avatar. Stephen Grant wants to give the amulet back to Arthur, but Khonshu won't let him, and then he is assaulted by the guards who decided just not to shoot him for some reason, although they all had guns. I don't know if the townspeople are under mind control or they're just really loyal. They all try to grab the amulet, and then Stephen Grant kind of phases out, and when he wakes back up, there's a bunch of dead people around him, and he's got the amulet in his hand with a bunch of blood. So there's a big chase in Germany, and the henchmen remember to use their guns again, and this is pretty good. You see Stephen Grant kind of phasing in and out, and every time he comes back, there's more death. But they do this chase scene to wake me up before you go, and I guess it's supposed to be fun and quirky, and something that could have been Bond-esque and thrilling ended up just being Disney. So Steven, or Mark Spector, ends up taking out most of the bad guys that we don't see, but again, this works except for the music. And the final two bad guys get taken out by a bunch of logs, which I'm assuming is Khonshu. And the CG looks terrible. And Steven wakes up in his apartment, thinks it's all a dream, but then he sees that his fish has two fins instead of one. He goes back to the pet shop, complains about it, then realizes he has a date with somebody he doesn't remember asking out. He ends up going out on the date, getting stood up, but it turns out he's the one who stood up the girl because he was 2 days late. After feeling dejected, he goes back home, figures out there was something weird going on, starts poking around his apartment. He finds a phone, sees that a girl named Layla has been calling him a lot, and we also see Frenchie's last name. Then he gets a phone call from a woman who's probably Layla, and she calls him Mark and says he's been missing for months. So I'm guessing that he's been Moon Knight for a couple of months at this point. She says something about his accent, and when he asks, why did you call me Mark, she hangs up. Then he starts hearing a voice in his head, which is Mark Spector. The room starts shaking, and Steven freaks out a little bit, heads down to the elevator. It keeps stopping at floors, and then we see the god Khonshu, and the CGI is just terrible. It's fine when he's standing still, but when he starts walking, it looks like a bad video game. Then we get a quick shot of Khonshu, which maybe is supposed to be a jump scare, but it didn't really work. Then he wakes up in a bus the next day on his way to work, We see Khonshu on the street in London. Turns out Arthur was following Stephen. Stephen sees him and realizes, yes, this man exists. It's not a figment of my imagination. And it turns out Arthur has people all over the place, and they all have to show their scale tattoo for Stephen and the audience. Yes, another secret organization. Listen, Marvel is stupid with them. There's the Hand, there's the 10 Rings, there's Hydra. Anyway, Arthur and his followers confront Stephen in the museum. A couple more of them show off their tattoos for Stephen and the audience. And as Stephen is judged, we don't see what happens with the scales on Arthur's arm. Now, I know the answer to this, but that would be spoiling something, and I'll save that for the full season review. We get some somewhat repeated exposition that Amit is out to judge the entire human race based on their past, present, and future and create a new heaven or a purer earth. Stephen is able to escape when some guests walk through the door, and then he just goes back to work and stays there, which services plot but makes absolutely no sense. Someone just tried to kill you. You saw what he did before in that German town, but you decide to go back to work and do inventory. So as Stephen Grant is doing inventory, it's closing time and he hears a dog. He sees a giant figure following him, and then he hears Haro's voice over the speakers asking for the return of the amulet. Then he's attacked by a giant Egyptian hellhound. Again, the CGI on this dog is just crap. And what makes it worse, it's mostly in the dark and you can still tell it's crap. Stephen Grant locks himself in the bathroom to hide from the dog, has a good talk with his Mark Spector persona who's trying to convince him to give up control of the body, which he eventually does just in the nick of time. As the dog bursts through the door, we see most of the fight from outside of the bathroom. Then we finally see the scene from the trailer, which is Moon Knight, and that's where the episode ends. Overall, I thought it was okay. Again, we have a great concept that is either poorly executed or it's just mediocre. That's Disney Plus. And once again, it wasn't woke. It wasn't filled with identity politics. It didn't even have any MCU, although we know what's to come because we did see that one scene. That was awesome. But just because something isn't woke doesn't make it good, especially when it comes from Disney Plus. Oscar Isaac was the best thing in it. He was very good as Stephen Grant and Mark Spector. Ethan Hawke was okay. I thought the directing was basic at best. I think they wasted a great opportunity to have a lot of fun with an unreliable narrator a la Fight Club, Memento, Inception, first couple of seasons of Mr. Robot, and even the first couple of seasons of Legion. Does it have potential? Absolutely. Do I have any faith in Disney Marvel? No. None at all. Ultimately, there is a Disney Marvel problem. Moon Knight was at times a great Marvel character, but Marvel does not exist anymore. Instead, we're given a homogenized version of Marvel's arguably most complex character from a company that hires people who understand the lore about as much as Disney understands a bill in Florida. I've said it before with Disney Plus, and I will say it again. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. Am I right, ladies? It's not that this was the worst Disney Plus show. It's just another bad Disney Plus show. It didn't vandalize the character as much as Loki did because you didn't really construct it. I would say it was more on par with Hawkeye, a story about Kate Bishop with a guy named Clint Barton in it who was very apologetic for his Ronin days and he was looking for his wife's watch. Moon Knight was based on the comic book character created by Doug Moench and Don Perlin, but made famous by Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz. At least the most prolific run for my generation, and still the best in my opinion because it was a noir Batman-ish comic. We had our main character Mark Spector impersonate Stephen Grant, a billionaire, and Jake Lockley, a cab driver, to get access to certain information and people to help him fight crime. It was a cool comic with femme fatales and a pilot named Frenchie, and this show has absolutely nothing to do with it, so there's no reason to talk about it anymore. I did a review on episode 1 that you can catch right here. We're going to start with episode 2. As I stated in my first review, and now I can stick with it since I've seen the whole series, this show is not about Moon Knight. It's not really about Mark Spector. It's about Layla and Stevie. I think a better title would be Layla Saves Stevie. That was awesome. I'm not against making a creative decision that might work better for a TV show. But when you can sniff out the motivation from a mile away, well, it's Disney Plus. For instance, when you take the uber alpha Stephen Grant persona and turn him into a gift shop employee beta male who somehow is a stand-in for the fanboy or girl, and then when he's running from Khonshu, randomly runs into his ex-wife in London. Was she just riding around on a moped that the actress obviously doesn't know how to ride with all of these tight shots? Yes, so Stevie is still coming to terms with the fact that he has another persona where he thought he was just sleepwalking. And of course, the audience knows this, and we're just waiting for the character to catch up. Then he gets saved by his ex-wife, who, again, randomly just came across him in a city of 10 million people, and it's not for the first time. And of course, he sits bitch. Layla, Mark Spector's wife, is not aware of the Stephen Grant persona. They go back to his apartment, his Stephen Grant apartment. She gives him divorce papers, and Stephen Grant starts to fall in love with her because she knows a lot about Egypt. Some fake cops come over to get Stephen Grant. Layla gets away because she's awesome, and they take Stephen Grant back to Arthur Harrow because they're part of his cult, a cult that he helped build up over years. We're not really sure because we're not really shown. Apparently, he has control of a town in Germany and control of a small part of London. And this is where this multicultural show gets a little racist. So much so that it got called out by one of its own, the male Brie Larson, Simu Liu.
Chisalela, Wakanida.
Ni hai, shokoshudo.
You speak Chinese? Mandarin.
Emotional, damn it!
Arthur wants the MacGuffin Scarab back to help him find his goddess, Amit, to whom he is the avatar, but he doesn't get a cool costume. He just runs around looking like Jared Leto with a cane. So after the vegan Arthur Harrow has a conversation with the vegan Stevie over some lentil soup, he asks for the Scarab back, and of course, Layla has it, and she brings it back because she needs to save Stevie. Arthur once again summons a jackal, and we meet Mr. Knight, who is nothing like the Mr. Knight from the comic. After flailing around a little bit, Mark finally convinces Stevie to let him be the real Moon Knight. And no, Mr. Knight is not the real Moon Knight. I'm not that big of a fan of it in the comic books, and it's worse here. And we get some pretty decent Moon Knight action with some bad CGI, and we better enjoy it because we're not getting much this series. Mark argues with Stevie. Of course, he loses the Scarab. Arthur ends up with it, and we're off to Egypt. Khonshu and Mark can't find Arthur and his Scarab, so they decide to have a meeting with the gods, which goes something like this. Khonshu eclipses the sun to get a meeting with the gods. By the way, all the gods speak through their very diverse avatars, and Khonshu, through Mark, tries to explain to the gods that Arthur Harrow is trying to release Amit. The gods summon Arthur Harrow and ask him if he's going to release Amit. He says no, and they go, okay. The Egyptian gods have banished themselves into the overvoid, and they just observe humanity through their avatars. They don't really want to get involved, and they get pissed at Khonshu and say, if you mess with the sky again, we'll encase you in stone. The gods don't know where Amit is buried, but apparently a sage from the past did, so they need to find his stolen sarcophagus. So once again, in a Disney product, we need a map for a MacGuffin. So they meet some LARPers, get into a fight. Layla fights off a guy twice her size with her necklace knife, and hey, Moon Knight comes out for a little while. Arthur shows up too, but they inexplicably just let him walk away, and he's not running anywhere fast. Remember, he put glass in his shoes. Now, why did he put glass in his shoes? Well, maybe the next 3 episodes will tell us. Remember when the gods said they would encase Khonshu in stone if he messed with the sky? Well, he has to mess with the sky because the map they got has a constellation on it that shows them the location, but the constellation is where the stars were 2,000 years ago. And instead of using an app, and there are multiple ones you can use, they decide to completely reverse the entire night sky as Egyptians very peacefully watch this happen and not themselves. Khonshu gets encased in stone, and Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, and that other personality that's a big mystery no longer have any powers, but not to worry because they have Layla, who saves Mark Spector and Stephen Grant from a very high caliber machine gun in a truck with some flares. So they get to the location, and conveniently everyone is gone. Stephen is back in charge, and of course Layla is leading him around. He bumbles around a bit. Stephen makes out with Layla, so now she is cheating on Mark with his other personality. You know, it probably would have been pretty cool to see Moon Knight fight a mummy, but instead we got to see Layla fight a mummy in the dark. And since there's no Moon Knight in the Moon Moon Knight show. For the next 2 episodes, we'll just get through the exposition-y bits. It turns out that the former Avatar that betrayed Ammit was Alexander the Great, and Ammit is encased in stone in his throat. We also find out why Layla's father died. Of course, it was Mark's fault. Don't worry, Mark's responsible for more than just that. We'll get to that later. Layla confronts Mark, and he does admit to being there when her father dies. She's obviously upset. Then Arthur Harrow catches up with them. Mark, who still has the statue of Khonshu and doesn't give it to her, as he tells her to run so he can buy her some time. Arthur gives Mark a chance to save himself. He fights him off and then gets shot and dies. Then we spend a lot of time in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, with Tarwede, who is the goddess of women and children. I don't know why she's shepherding the dead and not Anubis. American Gods Season 1 did it better. And all of the pivotal character scenes for Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, and that unknown persona happen in this episode, but it just drags and it's boring. If they went into, say, the Duat a little earlier, didn't tell us it was the Duat, and then we could question whether or not this was all in Mark's head, that might have been more interesting. Kind of like Fight Club, except they did this one backwards. In Fight Club, the narrator, or Joe or Jack, depending on whether you read the book or saw the film, was the main persona. The person we're following in this show is not the main persona because it's the beta male. I'm Jack's complete lack of surprise. So we have a hippo goddess with a British accent guiding Mark and Steven through the Duat, and their scales aren't balanced because they're missing a heart, but we find that out later, and they have to get them balanced by discovering Mark's deepest secrets. Now, both personas are being treated as 2 individual entities, but we find out one of the dark secrets, aside from all of the murders by Mark Spector, which kind of contradicts something later on, but we'll talk about that later. Stephen Grant was created due to, you guessed it, a childhood trauma, which is the same as the retcon in the comic books, except D+ decided to take that childhood trauma and step it up a little further. Mark Spector had a brother, and he took him down into a cave. The cave flooded, and his brother dies, and he feels responsible. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, we didn't get a bad dad. We got a bad, abusive mom. I'm shocked. The same week, we found out that Admiral Picard had an abusive mom who committed suicide right in front of him. Isn't genre entertainment fun? So not only was the Pyramid of Giza a safe space during the meeting with the gods, it turns out Stephen Grant is a safe space too, for Mark Spector's mom, who blamed him for his brother's death. Oh, it also turns out that mom is dead, and that the mom that Stephen Grant has been talking to on his phone wasn't really there. This is way better than Moon Knight having a fight with Werewolf by Night. Then Mark has a Good Will Hunting moment with himself. Then it's back to the Duat, where Mark and Steven fight some undead guys, and Steven sacrifices himself to save Mark in the Duat and ends up in the sands as Mark goes off to the field of reeds. But enough of that nonsense. It's back to Layla in the finale, and we don't even see Mark Spector until 13 minutes in of the 35-minute finale. Arthur gets Ammit encased in stone from Mark's body and takes off to the Pyramid of Giza, where he's going to go beat the crap out of the rest of the gods' avatars. Arthur leaves the scarab on Mark's body for Layla to find later. She follows him. Layla's so awesome, not only does Khonshu want her to be his next avatar, Tawadi wants her too. She doesn't need to be an avatar for any god or goddess. She is a fierce, independent woman. I mean, aside from the fact that she's an uninteresting Marvel female person actor, I forgot, Layla not only saves Moon Knight a couple of times this episode, she saves Khonshu, who immediately wants her as his avatar. Of course, she says no. So Ammit is freed, Khonshu is freed, and Mark's still dead. And yes, we finally get to Mark Spector about a third of the way through the episode. Mark leaves the field of reeds, goes back to the Duat. Him and Steven have a bonding moment. Both are allowed to leave the Duat somehow, because I guess Osiris is a big softie, or they were helped by the giant hippo goddess. Once again, the goddess of motherhood and children, who for some reason is shepherding the dead. When it's not Anubis, don't really care. A big wave of sand comes up. Then the hippo lady in her boat drives a wedge through it, and then they go through the gates, and Khonshu brings him back to life. Follow that. Then all of a sudden, Moon Knight can fly.
They fly now? They fly now!
But forget all that because we're here for the Scarlet Scarab origin story. Now, the Scarlet Scarab is a villain from an Invaders comic from the 70s. He was originally a dude, but this is the MCU, so of course they gender swap him into Hawkgirl, who again saves Stephen Grant and Mark Spector multiple times, Moon Knight at least 2 times in this episode, and frees Khonshu. Oh, there's one more. She also is the one who knows how to re-imprison Amit.
The power of this room will help us bind Amit to Harrow's body. Quick, grab my hand so we can start the spell.
So the gods who originally needed avatars have a giant kaiju battle in the middle of this, all while Layla, Stevie, and Mark are fighting Arthur. I almost forgot, hundreds, if not thousands of souls got gobbled up by Amit, never to return. And the big hero moment where a family and a little girl get saved belongs to Layla, who apparently is an Egyptian superhero.
¿En qué superhero mostré?
Message! I also need to point out that there's one point where Layla gets trapped up against a car and some guys come up with some guns and just shoot at her wings. Her entire lower torso is exposed. So after the big Egyptian god kaiju fight that destroys much of the Giza Plateau and 1,000 souls were eaten by Amit, they finally trap her inside of Arthur Harrow. So Khonshu tells him to finish the job and kill Arthur. Mark refuses and reminds him that once Amit was imprisoned, that he was free of his deal, which Khonshu honors. Then it ends rather abruptly and quite badly. We end up back in limbo quickly with them talking to the psychiatrist Arthur once again. He discovers his feet are bleeding. We can hear Jake Lockley. Yes, that's the mystery persona, was Jake Lockley. We can hear him and Steven talking, and they end up back in the apartment tied to the bed, free of Moon Knight, but not so fast. We get a post-credit scene of Arthur in a real asylum. He's taken out by somebody and killed by Jake Lockley. Yes, that was the post-credit scene. Not the lamest post-credit scene. That one belongs to Falcon and Winter Soldier, but who in the hell is going to know who Jake Lockley is? And what about all of those people in the asylum he murdered? And another massive missed opportunity and another dud from Disney Marvel on D+. Oscar Isaac deserves better. He's a good actor, but quite frankly, the Stephen Grant persona just got annoying. Almost annoying as Layla. Ethan Hawke was fine, but again, there wasn't a lot to work with, and it should have been a lot more like Daredevil and a lot less like Shang-Chi. Aside from having a positive masculine male problem, Disney Marvel has a hero problem, meaning they have a problem with heroes. They don't like them. They seem almost apologetic, and that really makes it very hard when you're in the superhero business. And once again, we have very inexperienced writers and bumbling morons trying to handle issues with complexity like dissociative identity disorder. And this is only the first of 2 bait and switch Marvel properties in 1 week. Things haven't been going that great at Disney, and Marvel, their one shining beacon, isn't shining anymore, and it's not helping. And this all lays at the feet of Kevin Feige, who should have quit after Endgame, a product of the Kevin Feige processing plant. Well, that about wraps it up for Layla Saves Stevie, and that can't be undersold. I almost forgot to mention that the costumed character of Moon Knight is only in roughly 20 minutes of the entire series. And now you know how 2 male-led TV shows can be MCU. I mean, who didn't want to see Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye, who has been underserved in the films, be led around and outclassed by Kate Bishop? Comic fans were chomping at the bit to see Hawkeye defeated by Echo and 5'0" Florence Pugh, and the Kingpin defeated by Kate Bishop and Echo. When I was buying my weekly funny books, I dreamed something like this would happen. But in all seriousness, the biggest disappointment for me is Moon Knight. Oscar Isaac is great casting, and if they would have leaned into the earlier Moon Knight comics, it could have been brilliant, but instead, he's led around by an Egyptian superhero. The far more capable female side character, who apparently the entire story runs through, who is a gender-swapped, inconsequential character from the comics, the Scarlet Scarab. And these 2 shows became the very definition of a major aspect of the MCU, the bait and switch. But we're not done. Because intersectionalism in entertainment doesn't just destroy the male characters, it eviscerates the female characters.
I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
I think it's safe to say that Disney Marvel has gone full CW, except in saying that Disney Marvel has gone full CW is an insult to the CW. Dear viewer, the MCU is dying. Marvel Phase 4 has turned into Marvel Stage 4. And yes, Disney Marvel has its Batwoman. Unfortunately, this is with a pretty popular character from the comics, She-Hulk, from the great John Byrne run and a member of the Fantastic Four. I guess we need to remember this is just Kevin Feige keeping his promise to bring more female characters than male characters into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he's done that to the tune of 2-1. Even the Access Media has called out Marvel for having a directionless Phase 4, but I would argue they have done exactly what they set out to do. The MCU. But what I think She-Hulk does establish, along with the rest of Phase 4 and the CW, is we have a brand new superhero subgenre for woke wine moms. Apparently, She-Hulk is inspired by Ally McBeal, The Practice, and Legally Blonde, and I would argue that's been the inspiration for the entirety of Phase 4, which is strange because when this all-female writing and directing staff was brought on, they admitted that they were inept at creating a courtroom drama, and I would agree. They're also inept at adapting comic books. Disney Plus's She-Hulk has been promoted as a feminist comedy, which is impossible because there's no such thing. But even if it was promoted purely as a comedy, it's missing one key element: comedy. Unless, of course, you're talking about all the unintentional laughter from all of the incredible cringe, especially that final scene, which we will get to. So I guess it's time to start talking about the show. I would warn you about spoilers, but you've seen most of this episode in the trailers and clips. We meet Jennifer Walters, Bruce Banner's cousin. We get some lawyer speak.
Enhance 34 to 46.
We get some lawyer speak, which is pretty basic bitch about the abuse of power, something Disney would know an awful lot about. Jennifer's in her office giving her presentation to a paralegal who's also very supportive, giving her the positive affirmation that she constantly needs. And of course, a toxic male, because this is a Disney Marvel production. He gets kicked out because he didn't like the presentation, and quite frankly, I agree with his assessment. It was a little too wordy, and it also sounded like it was written by an idealistic, woke Hollywood wine mom who doesn't really practice what she preaches. And again, because the writers admitted that they were inept at writing a law drama, we just move right past that and rush through the She-Hulk origin, which is drastically changed because of an extension on the Bechdel test. That's right, in the constantly changing intersectional feminist rulebook in Hollywood, we can no longer have a man mentoring a woman or a woman receiving power from a man. Jennifer also breaks the fourth wall like she does in the comic books for the first time in the show. The big difference is it was interesting in the comic books and it wasn't here. And in the clip you all saw, Jennifer Walters is accusing Captain America of being a virgin, and while she's sitting there yapping, she can't see the spaceship that comes out of nowhere and immediately crashes her car where she has to save Bruce Banner. After Jennifer, of course, saves Bruce, a couple of drops of his blood gets into hers, and she immediately hulks out, and we cut to black. To answer the question why Bruce Banner didn't hulk out, well, he created an inhibitor. Apparently, everything that's compelling and or interesting about the Hulk all happens off screen now. What about the spaceship, you ask? Well, that's a very good question. Apparently, it's from Sakaar, leading me to believe that Disney Marvel will eventually get around to destroying Planet Hulk. It's only mentioned one more time in the episode and never brought up again. Now, after Jennifer hulks out for the first time, she wakes up into the woods and then wanders into a bar bathroom where she is approached by a bunch of ladies who think she was assaulted, and instead of telling Jennifer to call the police, they just give her some makeup, some shoes, and send her on her way. And according to our wine mom writers, that scene was the most important in the entire series, so maybe you don't need to watch the rest of it. Now, after the ladies send Jennifer on her way, she almost gets assaulted by a bunch of toxic males. She hulks out, scares the hell out of them, and then she gets tackled by Hulk, and then we cut to black again. And our Disney Marvel hero's journey begins, and we've seen great examples of that in all of Phase 4 and Captain Marvel. What's the hero's journey, you ask? Well, our hero is great to begin with, and it's up to the rest of the cast and the audience to figure it out by the end. Now, having reviewed all but one live-action Disney Marvel series, and no, I did not watch Miss Marvel, and yes, I do know it had the best reviews and nobody watched it. But there is a bit of a pattern. They start out with varying degrees of mediocre to crap and all end like crap. And in the first episode of She-Hulk, not a single one of my expectations was subverted. As a matter of fact, it was much worse than I thought it'd be. Now, the writers have very quickly and very simply shown us that Jennifer is a great lawyer, but during the entire middle part of this thankfully very short episode, we find out that she's just a better and smarter Hulk than Smart Hulk. This entire segment of the content exemplifies, I think even better than Captain Marvel, the hero's journey, and I don't think there's a single scene that shows just how far the MCU has fallen into MCU than this.
Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. But when I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or I might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
Instead of pointing out the obvious, like Bruce surviving trauma, surviving suicide, surviving his first love's dad trying to kill him with the might of the US government, his second love sacrificing herself to save the world, we'll just do this. Quarter Black Garrett, why don't you show them how this scene should have gone?
Well, here's the thing, Bruce. I'm great at controlling my anger. I do it all the time. But when I'm catcalled in the street, when incompetent men explain my own area of expertise to me, I do it pretty much every day, because if I don't, I will get called emotional or difficult, or I might just literally get murdered. So I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
Oh my God, getting catcalled and questioned about my job performance, it's so much worse than that. They also got my drink wrong at Starbucks. Sure, it's the first episode and we could actually be starting a journey with Jennifer Walters, who has an actual character arc. It would be the first time in a Disney Plus series, but I think it's far more likely we'll end up what we've gotten before, a series filled with plot holes and forgotten story threads. The criticisms of Marvel of late have been the humor not landing or not being there at all, there being no stakes, the legacy characters getting completely vandalized, and the new characters being insufferable, annoying, or boring, all surrounded by incredibly cringe dialogue. And you get all of that here, and then Hulk and She-Hulk fight for no reason, then Jen leaves. This brings us to, thankfully, the final scene. Did I mention the CGI is absolutely terrible? Well, not as bad as the editing, because this is the single worst edited scene in all of Marvel with some of the worst CGI, and let's just go over it together, shall we? Jennifer is going to win her case against the toxic males who caused a bunch of accidental deaths. That's about as much as we know. Then Titania comes blasting in, and Jennifer thinks about turning into She-Hulk longer than the actual fight lasts. Now, prior to this, I have no idea what Titania was doing with the court bailiffs slap fighting. I have no idea where this bench came from, and after it was thrown on Titania, I have no idea where it went. And there's no way around it. I know some people like this, and I have no explanation for that because this was awful.
Who the hell are you? Jennifer Walters, attorney at law.
got to see a new side of Matt Murdock. You know, we got to see a side to him where he's kind of like, you know.
Gotcha.
Look how they massacred my boy.
And that wraps it up for this installment of the MCU. A show that could have been an answer to the phrase I coined, but it ended up being the very definition of the MCU.
She-Hulk smash.
And I guess we really got under Disney Marvel's skin. Yeah! Gotta give credit where credit is due. They really did try to have a fourth wall breaking, self-aware legal comedy. They broke the fourth wall and Marvel. And worst of all, not to bury the lead, we ended up being the villains. Not that that hurts content creators here on YouTube, not at all. It's great. What it does hurt is the fandom.
From the show, you can tell we very clearly expected the exact reactions that we predicted. I think that really goes to show just how unoriginal and tired and predictable these trolls are, that 3 years ago, we knew what they were going to say to something in 3 years. And they were saying all the things that I knew were going to be in the third episode. And I just sat back and waited.
But the mask is off. They made it very clear they not only hate the fandom, they hate nerds, and always have. It's fan baiting and hating come full circle. It started with Ghostbusters 2016, where essentially the troll was the villain. They did it in The Boys Season 2. Hell, they even did it in The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, who just so happens to be a Jar Jar Abrams disciple. And they did it in She-Hulk. Ladies and gentlemen, Disney Marvel has jumped the shark.
Ah, shit. Here we go again.
Because it appears that the only villains Hollywood is willing to portray is the paying customer.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
And it shouldn't surprise anyone that streaming stocks are falling, and Hollywood just had its worst box office in 25 years. And to make things even worse, they finally introduced Daredevil, who has set a Marvel record. He has been in the best thing they have ever done. Sorry, I need to rephrase that. The best thing they will ever do, and now he's also in the worst. No, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Daredevil on Netflix will be the best thing Marvel has ever done, and it's the one thing Kevin Feige had nothing to do with. Perry Chan, what's that quote from The Dark Knight that's applicable in this instance?
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Bet it stings that I used a DC film for that. And yes, it's true. She-Hulk is one of my favorite Marvel characters. I argued that she should have been introduced a long time ago, and it's also true that She-Hulk is the worst thing Disney Marvel has produced. But just think, if the Rings of Power wasn't around, it would actually be worse. At time of recording, it still has a 3.3 Metacritic score. It's 5 out of 10 on IMDb, and it has a 35% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Not even the Marvel stands on Twitter could save this one, although they did try, at least the ones who are living. I popped this up the other day, how it started, how it's going, and of course, the point just blew right past them. Hate to explain my jokes, so I'm going to only do this once, and I'm going to speak very slowly for the Disney Marvel stand. This is not about Matt Murdock getting laid. It is a measure of quality. Plus, if you were a fan, you would know he got laid in the Netflix series. First off, there's no such thing as a guy doing the walk of shame, especially after banging Elektra. But I have to make one exception. After seeing the entirety of She-Hulk and Jennifer Walters' character, this scene might be applicable. As far as the show goes, well, it started with cringe and ended with contortion. Fortunately for all of humanity, the episodes were extremely short. But what we did end up getting was something the writers of this show thought was different, but it ended up being right in line with the MCU.
Fix me. Get me back to normal. Give me that little device. Make me one. For me, calibrate it to me.
And for you.
No, I don't want to be a Hulk.
Triggers are anger and fear.
Those are like the baseline of any woman just existing.
All right then.
Shut up!
Shut up!
A titular character constantly playing the victim who ends up just being ultimately a vapid narcissist.
I mean, I've had to threaten to burn the studio to the ground just to get to this point. So it's been a dream come true.
All of this reflecting the worldview of the writers and the Los Angeles that we live in today. Texting, dating, drinking, going to a club, texting, dating, and more drinking. There's so much drinking in this show that I'm starting to think that someone on the writing staff, or maybe the entire writing staff, needs a meeting. Jennifer Walters did end up sleeping with a lot of guys, 3 in 3 episodes at one point.
Can we stop this?
And she's a slut.
Stop it.
Hey, I didn't say it, the show did. All in an episode where, oh my God, we shop for shiz.
Shiz. Shiz. Oh my God. Shiz.
We shop for dresses and a superhero outfit that we didn't see for multiple episodes. We saw Jen go to therapy and have sex with Daredevil.
A woman has needs.
Can you imagine if they make a pop vinyl 2-pack, which you know they will, of She-Hulk having sex with Daredevil? Like the drinker said, Disney Marvel has hit rock bottom.
Let your thoughts drift away, relax your neck, bend your knees if that's more comfortable, hold in your farts. Namaste all day.
What is this?
This brings us to the worst finale of the worst thing Disney Marvel has ever produced. And yes, there is supposed to be a plot surrounded by the unintended and hilarious message that choosing a career over family is a miserable experience. Ladies, it is possible to do both, you know. My wife managed it for decades. Turns out intelligentsia is the big bad, and intelligentsia is filled with Disney Marvel critics.
They took the Hulk manhood away, but then they gave it to a woman?
Yeah, man. I don't get it. What are you doing?
I have no problem with female heroes. I'm just saying, make your own.
I don't know about y'all, but I'd smash.
Oh. This is... What? What is this? Mal.
After being exposed at the Female Lawyer of the Year event for being a slut, again, I'm not saying it, the show is. Jen gets locked up at damage control, something Disney Marvel is going to have to do after this series. And the Hollywood idealized version of a best friend, Nikki, which is just a really competent personal assistant, and a guy named Pug go investigate intelligentsia at an anti-She-Hulk meetup. You can't make this stuff up. By the way, I'm going to be at a meetup with Geeks and Gamers on October 30th in Orlando, Florida. Maybe we can rename it to the Anti-She-Hulk meetup. Big surprise, the tech bro ends up being King Hulk, and the one who created intelligentsia. He's also gay, which kind of paints the writers in a woke corner, doesn't it? Does that make him a gay-misogynist?
What the hell?
What'd you expect? Condoms?
Anyway, he stole She-Hulk's blood and turns into a Hulk.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture.
I'm buff.
Yeah, come at me, bro.
They're the same picture.
Ivan Blonsky was there as Abomination, breaking his parole to do speaking engagements. Then all hell breaks loose. Titania shows up, Hulk shows up, there's a big fight, then they break the fourth wall. It's going to be very difficult to describe how bad this is. The writers did attempt some self-awareness. Unfortunately, that type of writing requires something they don't have: talent.
What kind of stupid finale is this?
And then you took the words right out of my mouth.
She-Hulk has decided she wants a different ending to her show, and we just want it to end. But the entire staff didn't miss the opportunity for a self-insert.
And I love
She-Hulk demands to see the manager, who happens to be Kevin, an AI running an algorithm. After Taika Waititi took shots at the Disney Marvel effects staff with Thor: Love and Thunder, they decide to do it a second time here.
You are very expensive. Wait until the camera is off you. The visual effects team has moved on to another project. Okay. There, do it now.
Better?
Some might say it's in bad taste, considering recent events that this show was filmed prior to, and I would just say it's Disney Marvel taste. So She-Hulk convinces the Kevin AI running an algorithm to change the ending from something less formulaic to something formulaic.
Well, yeah, that's what Hulks do. We smash things. Bruce smashes buildings, I smash fourth walls and bad endings. And sometimes Matt Murdock.
Okay, now get back to the show.
Oh, and Daredevil comes back, and no, I don't like that costume, and it's not comic accurate, and I didn't like the yellow one in the comics.
Well, it is very daring to use ketchup and mustard as your color scheme.
And now that it's all said and done, She-Hulk ended up being pointless, abysmal, forgettable MCU content for D+. But they did accomplish one thing: character assassination in orders of magnitude worse than any prior D+ show. Abomination, ruined. Wong, ruined. Hulk, ruined. Daredevil, ruined. Jennifer Walters' She-Hulk, ruined, but they weren't done there. It's bad enough Ragnarok half-assed it, but this puts the nail in the coffin of Planet Hulk. They introduced Scar.
I have someone here that I'd like you all to meet. This is my son, Scar.
Look at the top of his head.
They managed to do it. They Planet Hulk. Like I said in my first review, the most interesting things with the Hulk are all happening off screen. And that's because the writer's only real experience with fandom is hating it.
Well, I'm an actor, so, I have to service the story that's put in front of me. I have to do my best to make the story written work.
Really, I have no acting experience.
Being somebody who walks around the world as a hearing person.
Because I remember growing up and watching things on the screen, it was always a white guy who played this superhero, so we need more people of color to be in the MCU.
I think so many people feel like this project might be checking boxes in some way.
Deaf consultants, deaf actors, deaf writers, deaf consultants, deaf writers in the writer's room, deaf and indigenous, deaf consultants, actors playing deaf and indigenous roles, deaf experience, deaf indigenous amputee girl,
deaf community, deaf
representation,
deaf representation,
more inclusive.
Representation matters, indigenous,
hearing privilege,
tribal representation,
indigenous.
You would think after releasing the biggest flop in the MCU's history, The Marvels, Disney Marvel would lay low for a little while, go radio silent. But no, it seems that the criticism coming from all of humanity concerning the MCU has fallen on deaf ears. So join me, you over 950,000 awakening wonders and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. Let's review another piece of Disney Marvel content. That's right, despite having some reservations, Marvel went ahead with their big gamble. Not sure if you heard, but they released Echo, the ill-fated series that Kevin Feige himself said after its initial shoot was unreleasable, leading to multiple reshoots and a massive delay. And still, there were rumors that Disney Marvel was considering not releasing it at all. But after Kevin Feige realized he war-painted himself into an identity politics corner, he smoked the peace pipe, trimmed it from 8 episodes to 5 episodes, and dropped it all at once in the beginning of January on 2 streaming services. And it totally wasn't an attempt to boost what will be abysmal streaming numbers. And because it wouldn't be a Disney Marvel product without having to do some homework, Echo is a spin-off from an MCU bait and switch series, Hawkeye, that nobody watched, that will turn into an MCU solo series that no one will watch. Okay, except for YouTubers. Based on a Z-list villain from the Daredevil comics that the showrunners felt so passionate about, they completely changed the character. When it comes to Marvel's Echo, director Sidney Freeland made a major decision. Maya Lopez would have different powers than she has in the comics. In an interview with Variety, Freeland didn't want to spoil the changes she made, but made it clear how she felt about the original Echo's abilities. Her power in the comic books is that she can copy anything, any movement, any whatever. It's kind of lame. Sydney told the publication, I will say that's not her powers in the show. To be fair, maybe she misspoke. Maybe she meant make her powers lame, which she did. But we all know why they went ahead with the character Echo. she checks some boxes, but not enough apparently. They needed to add a couple. In the comics, she is a deaf indigenous female, and in the D+ series, she's a deaf indigenous body positivity female amputee. While there's no official word on whether she's gay or not, it's assumed. And still, the architect of the MCU, Kevin Feige, thought this was unreleasable, and after I've seen the fixed product, he should have stuck with that decision. But again, he can't because he wouldn't get headlines like this. Marvel's Echo, a cultural triumph in native storytelling. Stars of Echo discuss Marvel's indigenous superhero spinoff. Chaska Spencer commends Echo for beautifully handled Native American representation. Echo star Alaqua Cox on Marvel bringing deaf and indigenous representation to the forefront and why acting in ASL was challenging. And it was challenging to watch. Marvel's Echo is an imperfect but wonderfully important show. And why is it important? Well, the answer is obvious and previously stated.
Representation.
Representation. Representation. Representation.
If you don't believe me, let's go to Marvel, who's taking a page out of the Rings of Power playbook and hear from some super fans who totally aren't influencers.
I love the fact that the main character was deaf and that I got introduced to a whole new world. It was American Sign Language, it was Indigenous history, so it wasn't just an action show.
As a deaf person, I feel very proud to see that on screen.
Nice leading lady vibes. She's very cool.
It's the new MCU.
Someone signing in the middle of a fight was incredible.
So cool. If you're not a Marvel fan, this is a great way to be introduced to the Marvel universe.
Yes, again, it checks a lot of boxes. Unfortunately, it missed one. Good storytelling. All right, I put this off long enough. Let's talk about Echo, the show about a
deaf indigenous amputee
body positivity female superhero. Again, Echo was supposed to be an 8-episode series that was cut down to a 5-episode series, but technically it's a 4.5-episode series because the first 30 minutes of the first episode are a slightly more fleshed out previously on from a series you didn't watch, Hawkeye. The plot goes something like this. 5 months after the events of the Kate Bishop show, where Echo defeats Hawkeye and kills the Kingpin, the deaf indigenous body positivity female amputee Maya Lopez is being pursued by the Wilson Fisk organization, leading her to return to her hometown in Oklahoma, where she must completely ignore the misdeeds of her past, including murdering a lot of people on the orders of the Kingpin, reconnect with her Native American roots, endanger her family and community, and embrace her inner girl boss to destroy more male Marvel legacy characters. From the initial trailer that everyone was impressed with, Disney Marvel wanted everyone to believe that this would be in the same vein as Daredevil, especially when they touted that mature content warning.
This is a lie.
Aside from a couple of brief scenes, Echo would have been fine on the CW. The only potential violence is to the viewer from being bored to death. The first 4 episodes are a slog and not even worth talking about. American Sign Language or ASL would work in an indie film or some Oscar bait movie, but not in a superhero show. You're constantly waiting for the character's ASLR to catch up to what you can read on the screen. It was more like ASLMR. And after that nearly 30-minute previously on, the vast majority of this series is filled with Alaqua Cox stunt woman riding a motorcycle, excessively long montage scenes set to a pop song with characters we don't care about looking sad, repetitive sweeping shots of the same mural, and lots and lots and lots of indigenous representation, only occasionally interrupted by pure cringe.
Kingpin had his run. It's time for Queen. He's handing me Kingpin.
That's right, Maya Lopez, or Echo, the hit deaf indigenous female body positive woman who used to work for the Kingpin and now thinks he's dead, either wants to take down or take over his organization. Your guess is as good as mine. And as far as those cameos are concerned that director Sidney Freeland teased, well, there's a repurposed Hawkeye cameo from the Kate Bishop show, and yes, Daredevil. In this corner, weighing in at 195 pounds, back in his proper red costume, is Daredevil. Finally facing off against his C-list comic book nemesis, weighing in at a flabby 150 pounds, Echo. In a...
Cripple fight! Cripple fight! Attention shoppers, outside today we have Cripple fight outside.
After the clearly out of shape Echo stands in with Daredevil for an inexplicable couple of minutes in the
Cripple fight! fight!
He runs away, never to be seen again for the rest of the show. But enough of that. Despite Echo being billed as a return to the gritty, grounded Marvel of old, which Kevin Feige had nothing to do with at Netflix, it ends up not even being a drama. It's just a series of events about indigenous family.
Family.
Who are all from the Chotwa tribe. There's Scully, Maya's step-grandfather, played by Graham Greene, who quite frankly is the only good thing in this aside from Charlie Cox's Daredevil, but he only exists to occasionally share some wisdom with the insufferable Echo. There's Henry Lopez, Maya's uncle, who also works for the Kingpin and owns a roller rink, who doesn't want to help her until he does after being betrayed by his shoe cleaner. The only person Maya appears to like, but don't quote me on that because I'm not really sure, is Cousin Bonnie, who only exists to be a hostage and Cousin Bonnie. Maya's other cousin is Cookies or Biscuits or whatever the hell his name is, who plays the obligatory Disney Marvel effeminate male assistant to our insufferable MCU protagonist. Maya's grandmother Chula is the only other character who seems semi-fleshed out. She's haunted by the death of her daughter, she has some mysterious powers, and she makes Maya's costume. Sorry to go all Chris Stuckman there and basically just say their names and give very little context, but those were the cards I was dealt. This brings us to Maya Lopez, or Echo. In the comic books, Echo is from the Cheyenne tribe, but the showrunners felt so passionate about giving us an authentic indigenous experience, they changed it to the Choctaw tribe and cast an actress from the Menominee tribe. We learn that the deaf indigenous body positivity female amputee Echo lost her leg in a car accident as a child when a shard of glass broke off from the windshield. And I guess the child actress playing the very young Maya Lopez decided to channel the older Maya Lopez by showing absolutely no emotion when this happens. I doubt the writers of this show know that windshields or windows don't break like that. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's highly improbable. What would have made more sense is just her leg being crushed in the car accident. Hell, a freak accident at a casino would make more sense than this. But the dumb doesn't end there. Remember when I said series director Sidney Freeland said Echo's powers in the comics were lame? Quick reminder, Echo in the comics has photographic reflexes, basically the Taskmaster's powers. Any move she sees once, she can perfectly duplicate. Nothing original, but a hell of a lot better than what the hacks from this show came up with, echoing back to draw powers from past ancestors, and not just any ancestors, female ancestors, and yes, this is where the MCU kicks in. Throughout this 5-episode series that feels like 18 episodes, we get flashbacks to previous ancestors, including the first Choctaw girl boss who led her people out of a spa after a mud bath with a woodpecker, followed by the second Choctaw girl boss from 1200 AD who was a female stickball player, who with her tribe had to take on another tribe, which included the very first indigenous anabolic steroid user. Of course, she won the game because this is the MCU, never mind the fact that there were no female stickball players. So much for authentic. The third Choctaw girl boss was the daughter of a light horseman, the rangers of the tribe who wanted to be a light horseman but couldn't because she's a girl. But she does it anyway because this is the MCU and saves all the men from the evil white men with a few easy shots and that signature Disney Marvel female protagonist smirk. The fourth Choctaw girl boss is Chula, Maya's grandmother, who had a fatherless pregnancy and gave birth to the fifth girl boss, Maya's mom, who was also deaf, and indigenous Jesus, who possessed the powers of healing. And you guessed it, in the Choctaw tribe, only women can draw on the power of other women in a time of need, but apparently they sat it out when the Choctaw tribe was moved from Mississippi and Alabama to Oklahoma. And I guess they have no problem helping out the unrepentant sociopathic murderer Maya Lopez. At no point in this show does Maya Lopez try to atone for her past, which is a bit of a moral quandary for anyone who lives outside of modern Hollywood. It's tough to follow around a protagonist who can't talk, can't emote, can't act, and who is completely unlikable. To be fair, any morality is a quandary for modern Hollywood because they lost the ability to pretend to decipher right from wrong a long time ago. Anyway, this brings us to the one sole character anyone would even consider watching this show for. Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. Arguably Disney Marvel's greatest villain was completely destroyed in the Kate Bishop show, and he returns to Echo to get destroyed some more. Somehow Kingpin being shot nearly at point blank in the eye. Does he return to reestablish his empire and exact bloody vengeance, or does he come back to win the heart of the daughter who's not his daughter, who just so happened to try to kill him by begging her forgiveness, offering Echo his empire, and making her the Queen Pin? If you guess the latter, you're smart and you know your MCU. But it doesn't end there. At one point in the series, Kingpin asks Echo to kill him with the hammer he killed his father with, and she says no. After Maya spurns Kingpin's offer of seppuku, this is where Echo goes from just a boring show to full-on MCU cringe.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
In the final battle, Kingpin brings his army to attack a local powwow to get Maya back. I'm not kidding. And if you didn't think things could get any worse with Gaia at the end of Secret Invasion, I raise you one indigenous girl boss, Voltron.
No, 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 no.
And the MCU achieves maximum girl boss today, and Maya can even pass on her powers. Even Grandma gets a shot in. And the unrepentant murderer defeats the Kingpin again by taking away his childhood trauma and making him cry. And this completes another chapter of Disney Marvel's hero's journey, where the hero was great all along. All Maya had to do was go back home and talk to her grandma to reconnect with her powers. And that's pretty much it. What did we learn? Disney Marvel still sucks, and indigenous people can now see their authentic selves in an unrepentant murderer. Despite all that, I still have some questions. Why in the hell would this security guard feel up Maya? No offense. Why did Daredevil flee a crime scene with somebody who was still awake who just committed a murder without at least questioning Maya? To be fair, it's not like she was gonna talk. How did the guy who stood toe-to-toe with Kingpin, the Punisher, Bullseye, and 100 ninjas have a hard time with a flabby 150-pound girl? Where were the Choctaw ancestors during that whole Manifest Destiny thing? How did a deaf body positivity amputee jump around a train before she connected with her powers? And why in the hell would you do Kingpin dirty like that by having him defeated again? Did Disney learn nothing from Kylo Ren and Kang?
Nope.
Congratulations, dear viewer, you have made it to the end of Marvel's Rise and Fall of the MCU Part 2, the Disney Plus disasters. And if you watch Part 1, you've been on a long journey. A tragic story told in Disney's own content. And while a lot of Marvel characters got kicked in the balls, so did the fans. As much as you and I would love for the MCU to end, apparently Disney Marvel isn't quite ready for that yet, and if they work really hard, we're probably going to get it Part 3. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com